The event begins at 8 a.m. Pacific Time. 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 Please welcome the host of SightTech Global, Brian Fischler.
Welcome to the third annual SightTech Global. This is a free, virtual, and global event about accessibility and the technologies like artificial intelligence that are having a huge impact in the lives of the blind and visually impaired. If you're not familiar with artificial intelligence, just think about the movie Terminator 2, except the machines are not here to kill us, they're here to help us improve our lives. Our program over the next 2 days features some of the top technologists who are building tomorrow's assistive tools today. I'm Brian Fischler, your host. I'm going to do my best to fill the shoes of Will Butler, the host of SightTech Global for the past 2 years. Will was an exceptional host, and they really are some very big shoes to fill because the guy's like 6'7". SightTech Global would like to extend a very special thanks to Will Butler for doing an outstanding job hosting the past 2 SightTech Globals. But back to me, because it's now my time to host SightTech Global. A little bit about me. I'm a comedian. I've been on Top Gear USA. I've been on the Today Show. I've even been Maxim Magazine's Comedian of the Month. Over the years, I've worked as a technology trainer, and I also work in web accessibility, helping small to large companies improve their web accessibility as well as their mobile applications. If my voice sounds familiar to you, it's because for years I've also been the host of That Real Blind Tech Show, where we talk about the good and bad of assistive technology. In fact, I was also on a panel last year speaking at this very conference, as I'm also the commissioner of the All Blind Fantasy Football League, which was featured in the Yahoo mini documentary. I lost my vision due to retinitis pigmentosa, and I've had no usable vision since 2009, so you can't say I am a very big fan of any and all talking technology. You could say that talking technology even saved my life, and I really enjoy passing my knowledge and experience along with talking tech to my fellow visually impaired and blind peeps. So I know some of you like a little description, but that's not really my thing. I can, however, tell you that I'm wearing clothes. I have no clue what color they are. They're probably covered in my guide dog's hair, who's sitting here at my feet, Wesley, because he always likes to keep a little part of himself with me and on me. I'm speaking to you from a studio where we're recording this in New York City. And hold on a sec, as I've always wanted to do this. Not live from New York, it's SightTech Global. Thank you for indulging me with that. I'm sitting in front of a Times Square-sized billboard that's dark blue and has the logos of SightTech Global and the Vista Center patterned across it. SightTech Global is a production of the Vista Center for the Blind and Visually Impaired. The Vista Center is a Silicon Valley-based not-for-profit that has been serving the blind and low vision for over 75 years. They work with 3,000 blind and low vision people every year to help them live the life they want to live. All proceeds from SightTech Global are used to support the Vista Center. Before we start the show, I'm going to bring Corey Lyle, CEO of the Vista Center and chairperson of this production, up here to say a few words.
Well, thank you so much, Brian, and welcome. We're honored to have you host SightTech Global 2022. My name is Corey Lyle, and I'm the CEO of the Vista Center for the Blind and Visually Impaired. Before the conference gets started, I want to introduce everyone to Vista Center and our work with thousands of blind and visually impaired people each year in the San Francisco Bay Area. We also work with the SightTech Global team to produce this event, and we are the beneficiary of the SightTech Global sponsorships from great companies like iSenpai, Fable, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Waymo, Ford, LinkedIn, APH, Humanware, and a few others. The Vista Center is a 501c3 nonprofit founded in 1936 with a mission to empower blind and visually impaired individuals to embrace life to the fullest through evaluation, counseling, and training. We believe vision loss is not a barrier to independence. We're proud to provide a full range of services at low or no cost to our clients. We serve 3,500 people annually, including children, working adults, and seniors, from age 3 to our oldest client who is 103. For years, one of the most significant advantages for visually impaired individuals has been and will continue to be technology. We are most grateful to SightTech Global speakers and sponsors who are incredibly committed to shaping new technologies to create a more accessible world. Thank you to all of the professionals that bring a special blend of intellectual rigor, creativity, and innovation to provide inclusive experiences for millions and millions of people around the world who live with vision loss. And finally, we are very fortunate to have the volunteer leadership of Ned Desmond, who produces this event for the Vista Center. He is the former COO of the media company TechCrunch, and today is an operating partner at the venture firm SOSV. Thank you, Ned, for putting on this third edition of SightTech Global. Now back to you, Brian.
Thanks, Corey, for backing this very important event and for all the work that you and your team do in the Bay Area for the blind and visually impaired. Now, let's get started with SightTech Global. You may not know this, but thousands of people are watching this all over the world today. In fact, last year, people joined us from over 70 countries. The best thing about being free and virtual is anybody can join and everybody can learn. We worked really hard to make everything very accessible. A couple of days ago, we had a mock event where people were able to come on and test out their screen readers and ask questions to make sure that today goes as smoothly as possible. Let me give you a mini tour of the site. First off, there's no login. You just have to get to this page and you have full access to the entire conference. We ask people to register so we can keep them updated, but anyone could join without registering. Right now, you're on the main page to SightTech Global. This is also the virtual main stage where you can find all of SightTech Global's top level content. This comes to you via a YouTube player, which is embedded in the site. Everything here is pre-recorded, even me. We will publish all of these videos to the SightTech Global YouTube channel. So people will be able to watch at their leisure, and we will be including human automated captioning after the event, so everybody will be able to enjoy these videos at their leisure. The other page associated with this event is the agenda page, which you can access from this page or the top site navigation. On the agenda page, you'll find the lineup of all the main stage events with links, along with links to breakout sessions, which will take you to Zoom. The Zoom sessions are all live, and remember, you can always catch the main stage sessions later on YouTube. You'll also see links for chat, which is a unified chat throughout the conference. The chat is provided courtesy of Slido. We suggest that you open it in another tab, and remember, everybody can see what you're posting. In the breakout sessions, there's a Q&A chat feed embedded in the Zoom. Our first session this year is actually a follow-up from last year on a collaboration between APH and Humanware to create a dynamic tactile display for the education market. Greg Stilson is going to be talking with Devin Coldaway. Greg is also going to be holding a breakout session, and remember, those are live, so make sure to catch that on the lineup page.
The dynamic tactile device, that holy grail for education, is near. Moderator Devin Coldaway, speaker Greg Stilson.
Thank you, and thank you, Greg, for joining us here today. I think that probably a lot of our viewers are familiar with APH, but they may not be familiar with your role there and how you apply technology to the APH mission. So maybe we can just start out by you explaining what it is you do there and how that helps people.
Sure. Thanks for having me. And so my name is Greg Stilson. I run the Global Technology Innovation Team at the American Printing House for the Blind. And what this means is it's a group that is sort of a combination of technical product managers, quality assurance analysts, and software engineers, with sort of the mission to develop technology or partner with companies to develop technology that serves our core mission, which is The American Printing House for the Blind is primarily focused in the education realm. We are a federally funded organization in the United States to basically provide technology for to sort of advance the education of students who are blind or have low vision. We started out primarily in the education sector, but have grown significantly really in the last 10 years, more towards an international entity now, providing products all over the world. We also partner with different organizations to distribute our products, things like the Mantis Q40 or the Chameleon. So yeah, we started off sort of in education, and that's really where our key focus is. That's where all of our federal dollars go. But we've kind of grown beyond that to really focusing on helping anyone who is blind or low vision in any aspect of their life.
And you focus on the sort of technological side of things, reaching out and working with partners to develop new technologies or adapt to them.
You got it. Yeah. So internally, we have software engineers who develop technology or develop applications to either go on the technology we're building or just standard mobile applications and things like that. A lot of the high tech hardware that we release is in partnership with other organizations, the folks like the Humanwares or the Visperos or the Dots and around the world. And so basically modifying or coming up with new technology with those organizations based on a need that we see in the primarily in the education system, but now, as I mentioned, it's kind of going beyond that as well.
Hmm. And I know that there's been a lot of advancement in technology over the last 10, 15 years in accessibility, in like just general data accessibility and portability, all these things that have helped a lot of people connect with the things they need. Where have these private companies and services fallen short, in your opinion, that you've sort of felt the need to step in?
So it's a good question. There's the first thing we often look for is where is the unmet needs. I'll give you an example. One of the products we released a couple years ago was the Mantis Q40. What we were hearing from folks, there was always the refreshable braille display market that used the 6-dot Perkins keyboard to input into a braille display when it's connected to whatever other devices you want to be connected with. However, we started hearing from especially sort of the high school kids, the transition kids, and then ultimately the folks in the workplace that they were finding that they preferred to use a QWERTY keyboard. And so being able to blend a refreshable braille display with a QWERTY keyboard that has some level of intelligence was a hole that we sort of looked at filling at that point. And so that's sort of where the Mantis Q40, the idea generated from, and it kind of grew from there. So, as we look forward, we've always been on this mission for a multi-line refreshable braille display. And today, all of the braille displays that you see are single line braille displays, which is valuable to have braille at your fingertips, but in the process of learning, especially learning content like science, technology, and math, it's really hard to do math one line at a time.
No kidding. And so tell me a little more about this new project. Maybe you can give us a quick summary of what it actually is, and then we can talk a little more about why it's needed before we get into the details.
Yeah, absolutely. So we kind of previewed this a little bit last year at SightTech, and it is the primary goal of this project is to create a sort of self-contained all-in-one education tool that has multiple lines of braille on it and is also capable of rendering a tactile graphic as well. And that's really what we've seen in the past is we've seen one or the other. We've seen products like the Canute, which are strictly single lines of braille stacked on top of each other. We've seen products that APH have worked on in the past, such as the Graffiti project, which was 100% a tactile graphics display. What we're trying to do with this product, and it's a combination of, I think, the marriage of good timing and good technology kind of coming together, is create a situation where you're able to produce standard braille and graphics on the same surface. And there's a huge benefit with that. What we found with the Graffiti project, for example, was If you just give a blind person a tactile graphic with 0 labels or 0 context, it is really, really hard to understand what that is, right? And so one of the biggest pieces of tactile graphics is the labeling, is the creation of context, and you really can't do that without providing these Braille labels and things like that. So that's primarily the function. The device is a self-contained tool with a multi-line tactile array, but it has its own Braille keyboard on it to control and do input into the device as well. It'll have your standard tablet functionality, so your Wi-Fi, your Bluetooth, your microphone inputs, headphones, all that kind of stuff. It's also going to have an HDMI out as well, so that a teacher who may not know Braille can actually see what the student is doing on a monitor as well. So it's that's really where we were looking to go.
It's interesting, the providing that context and talking about learning something like math or chemistry using a single line Braille display sounds incredibly difficult. Can you tell me a little more about what the sort of state of the art is for like a student who is, you know, in high school or something like that, and what is the process for creating and distributing these textbooks?
That is a really good question, and I'm really sad to say that, you know, in the 20 years that I've been out of school as a blind student myself, we have not seen much of an evolution from a textbook distribution process, from a materials distribution process. So APH is one of the largest textbook providers here in the United States, and basically the process goes kind of something like this. We receive the textbook from the publisher, and it goes into a repository called the NIMAC. This special accessible file basically then goes to our Braille transcription team. This transcription team will run it through some automated software to do the base level conversion into Braille. But at that point, when you do that base level conversion into Braille, you lose any type of proper formatting, right? And with subjects like science and math, formatting, especially with things like matrices, long division, you know, the vertical formatting is crucial at that point. And so all of that is wiped out when you run it through these automated tools. And so you have a Braille transcriber whose job it is to look at the print textbook and essentially determine context into what the formatting should look like so that it makes sense to the blind reader. At some point during this entire process, we recognize that there are tactile graphics that have to get made. So we send those to our tactile graphics team, which makes them sort of in parallel to the transcriber going through their process. After it's all said and done, and the transcriber feels good about their side, the graphics artist feels good about their side, they all come back together. And in some cases, those graphics get combined with the text content of the book. In other cases, especially in higher level math and things like that, you will end up with volumes and volumes of the text content, and then maybe a volume of just tactile graphics. Just to put it in perspective, we did a Algebra 2 book last year. That book took over 40, or it consisted of over 40 volumes of Braille, and cost over $30,000 to produce. So that just sort of gives you the context of where we are today, but also ultimately where we've really been over the last 30 to 40 years when you look at it.
So how do you know that it's time to do something new? How do you know that this technology is ready to go? I know that you're working with DOT, and we're actually talking with DOT later today about some of the technical aspects of their new Braille DOT technology. But like, how do you know? Because this has been something people have tried and sort of succeeded to various levels with over 10, 20 years.
Yep.
But like you said, it hasn't gotten that adoption. It hasn't gotten to that level. So how did you know that this is the time to do it? And how did you like start thinking about developing that into a product?
Yeah, no, it's because we've made several attempts at this, and I will say we're not the only ones, right? There's been startups out there who believe they've cracked the code and were ready to release something, and it never came to fruition. So I think it's really three points. I think the technology that Dot has created with their new Braille Dot technology that they've created, the Braille cells, um, is a big piece of the puzzle. We've never seen anything that is, number one, this durable, and number two, feels like a natural Braille cell. Usually you have to make very significant trade-offs, because at the same time, we're also trying to reduce the cost of the Braille cell, which has been astronomically high for,
Hmm.
40, 50 years. So we look at that, right? So you have this emerging technology from Dot that has been proven. We've seen a lot when we put out our requests for information. Secondly, I think it's a match of good partners as well. This is not something that APH is doing on our own. It's not something that Dot's doing on their own. So this project initially kicked off with a partnership between the American Printing House for the Blind and Humanware, a company out of Canada. And Humanware really has taken on the manufacturing side of things. So when you look at sort of our different roles in this partnership, APH is really heavily focused on the UX. We're focused on the testing. We're focused on the software interface and design. Humanware is doing a lot of the coding. Their engineers are actually doing the vast majority of the coding. Our team is there to assist. And Dot is providing that Braille cell technology. So we each kind of have our own roles in this partnership. So I mentioned that it's the partnership, it's the technology, and I think it's just the timing as well.
Hmm.
We're to a point now where electronic delivery of books is not a foreign concept. It isn't, unfortunately, in our field, but in the broader landscape, it is. I've questioned how many what the ratio is for reading e-textbooks versus, or I'm sorry, e-books versus regular books now,
Hmm.
and it's not something that is a foreign concept. So I think with those three pieces all coming together, and we kind of have an internal joke of at APH that the stars and planets have to align for this project to work successfully. And we knew immediately this was not something we could do on our own.
Roger, yeah, and so let's talk about the actual device and the development of it. I'm always really curious about this process of creating a new device with a sort of very specific use case, especially one that has been tried before. So maybe could you tell me a little bit about the sort of going into this project when you realized, like, okay, the stars and the planets have aligned, we think. So what were your must-haves when you were making this, and how did you design around those?
It's a great question. So number one, the Braille, we had to find a technology that made the Braille feel natural, right? Number one, you're going to be teaching entirely new concepts with a product like this that's never been done before. So teaching somebody to feel a different feeling Braille dot, or it would almost be like, I equate it to a sighted person saying, you can only read in this print font from
Hmm.
now on, right? And so number one was making sure that the Braille dot felt natural, and that it was durable, because being in the education system, kids are not
Yeah.
they're not gentle with these products, right? So making sure that it was durable. So that was number one, is that in order to do this, we had to be able to ensure that the dot felt natural. Number two was be able to find a technology that could put graphics and Braille on the same surface. When we looked at this, in order to achieve our, what I'm calling sort of our North Star goal, that is that we can put a textbook, we can digitally deliver textbooks to students. And to do that, you have to be able to put text or Braille text and graphics on the same surface. That's how it's displayed in textbooks today. And that's really, like I said, how you create that contextual understanding for a tactile reader.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are sort of our top three things. But this project, as I mentioned in the past, it doesn't move forward unless we can achieve that textbook goal. So, we have all these other goals of putting a multi-line word processor on this, or a graphing calculator, and all those things, are in the plans, and we're working on those as we speak. But having said all that, the funding perspective doesn't happen unless we achieve that textbook goal. And so that's really where we're laser focused at this point.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that too. But before we get to like how it's funded and how you'll get it into the hands of students, I wanted to ask a little more about the development of the hardware because this has been in the works for a couple of years, but I can't imagine a more difficult time to attempt to design, build, and manufacture a totally new device with, pandemic, with like a community that is scattered all over the world. How did you do it? And do you have any like, do you have any advice for anybody trying a new hardware startup like this? I've heard it's unbelievably difficult.
It is. I don't want to do UX testing on a physical device that people have to be touching virtually. I don't want to do that again. That was that was really hard. So the number one thing when we were looking at the hardware was what is the right size for the tactile array. And I'm telling you, Devin, we had so many competing opinions, even internally here. We were looking at sizes such as 20 lines by, or sorry, 13 lines by 20 cells. We were looking at 28 cell lines, 30 cell lines, 32 cell lines, and the one that we all thought was going to be the winner was the 40 character line. And the reason being is because the standard piece of Braille paper today is 40 characters wide by 25 lines. So we all were thinking in the before we started the testing that, well, it's just natural that it would be a 40 character line because that would make our software side really easy. We don't have to modify anything that's there. We can take the existing books and just slap them on this display and break it up vertically and it would work just fine. And then we put it in front of people, and because the way that our tactile array works, and we have more dots than actual Braille cells to create that equidistant pins from each other to create those graphics, 40 characters wide by, we tested 40 characters by 10 lines. That was a gigantic device. That was bigger than a kid's desk when we actually put it down on the table. And so what we ended up doing, we were doing the vast majority of this testing towards the end of 2020, beginning of 2021, is we were sending out literally wood blocks of the dimensions of what this product would be. We also sent out 3D prints, but most importantly, what we ended up doing, and I give massive credit to our tactile graphics team, is we sent out basically paper packets cut into the size of these tactile graphics arrays. And what we did is we put various graphics, combinations of Braille and graphics, on these different size pieces of paper to say, imagine that you are looking at a graphic and you can only see this much of that graphic at this time. How much are you able to understand? And we were also doing things like shrinking or scaling the graphic to the various sizes to see how much detail was lost at that point. And so, and then what we would do is jump on Zoom and talk through. We'd make them go through the different packets in, item by item, graphic by graphic, and document what they were doing, because this wasn't something that we could just be like, here's a whole packet of paper and then fill out a survey. It didn't work like that. So when it was all said and done, I think the most important decision that we had to make in this project, by sheer, I don't know, force of will that we went through here, was we settled on a tactile array size of 10 lines by 32 cells of Braille. And it, where we are today looking at the product, it 100% feels like the right move. And it was very clear by all of the feedback that we got that 32 by 10 was the preferred size.
That's interesting, because you can't figure that out just in the lab sort of or on paper. It has to be with people who are actually using it saying like, oh no, this is a no-go. And, that's interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah, not only that, but we were looking at, we were testing with teachers of the visually impaired. We were testing with students. We were testing with students with multiple disabilities, and then parents, right? What would work at the home as well as in the classroom? Because at home, you have a big kitchen table that maybe you could slap a bigger device on. But then at school, you have these little desks that the thing won't fit on.
I remember, I feel like desks should have gotten bigger sometime in the last 20 or 30 years, but probably they got smaller. So tell me, but let's talk about the software side a little bit too, just because I know that When I talked with Dot a while ago, when they were first talking about their technology, it was very much focused on iOS and using some of the stacks in iOS to directly put graphics on it and stuff like that. And I'll talk with them about that more. But I understand you're working on an Android base and sort of designing your own software base from the beginning. What made you do that, and what's the advantage that gives you?
So we looked at sort of the approach that Dot and others have taken, in that the device is a separate peripheral for another tool, right? And the challenge that we're facing there is that in a classroom, number one, there's very little consistency throughout the United States on what devices these students have access to, right? Some districts are Chromebook districts, some districts are iPad districts. Many districts don't allow the student to even have the phone in the classroom, right? So immediately when we were looking at this, saying, all right, if this has got to be used at the same time that the sighted peers are using this, it has to be a tool that can be immediately picked up and used by the student, right? So creating a secondary tool to some other device kind of was out of the question at the beginning. And secondly, the primary function of this was an ebook reader, right? To be a textbook reader, to be able to allow a student to immediately turn to chapter 5 or page 157 and just jump right there. Today, you use tools like a Kindle or an iPad or things like that to access your books. Those books are not connected to something else, right? And so for a student to, in the same fashion that they pull a book out of their backpack, we wanted them to have the exact same experience in pulling this device out of the backpack with nothing else at that stage. And so it was pretty clear that it had to be a self-contained tool. Which we recognize that increases the cost, it vastly increases the development effort on our side. But it was the right move, especially with our focus on the education side of things and making sure that those textbooks were immediate.
Gotcha. Yeah, it has to be, do it right, just because if you're planning on building a platform for the next few years or 10 years of essentially Braille textbooks and use by this community, do it right the first time so you don't have to come back in 2 years and be like, okay, so now we have to redo it, but not as a display device for a second device.
You got it. And the benefit here is that we're not just limited to the stuff that we do. Just because we put our own apps and experiences on it, one of the apps that we're specifically looking at is what's called a tactile monitor. And that's essentially you doing the same things that Dot and other folks are doing, in being able to turn this device into a receiving tool from other devices, in the same way that you can connect a refreshable Braille display today to a smartphone or a computer and have the screen reader drive that experience. So, we're not just limited on that. This is sort of the way we look at it is it's the best of both worlds.
Right. You get to add, yeah, it's not that it's one or the other, it's you adding on top. So you mentioned that increases the price, obviously, and also that you have these different districts and capabilities across the country and around the world. As you said, you're increasingly an international organization. How do you get these into the hands of kids? And how does that funding work? Because I know it's a first-time device. It's going to be expensive. There's support. There's a lot to think about. So you can tell me about how this is paid for by districts and by APH. I'm just curious about the sort of financial side here.
Sure. So I can talk to you about how it works in the United States, and we're still we're working with our
We'll talk about the rest of the world later. Next year, it's okay.
We're trying to figure that part out as we speak. But at least here in the United States, APH is funded by a federal appropriation that's been around since, I want to say, 1879 or something like that. It is still drastically an underfunded appropriation. Basically, what we do is we look at the census that says how many students are qualified under the legal definition of blindness or low vision. And you look at, I want to say that we published it this year, it was just over 55,000 kids in the United States that qualify for services from APH. The federal appropriation gives approximately, it comes out to be about $460 per kid to purchase specialized tools or materials or manipulatives or anything. Like I said before, APH, we're talking about the high-tech stuff, but we also do extremely low-tech stuff, right? Selling things like Braille paper and tactile graphics and that kind of stuff as well. So it all comes down to how many kids. So a state like California, for example, gets a bigger pot of money because they have more kids in that qualify for this funding. That funding can only be spent at the American Printing House for the Blind. I always joke that it's a very effective monopoly. At that stage, you're looking at $460 per kid, right? Like, so first off, for a blind kid that needs a refreshable Braille display today, which is like $2,000,
Yeah.
you basically have to borrow from the kids that need, I would say, less expensive products. If, let's say, some kid is just under the legal definition of low vision, they may not need nearly as many adaptations or tools as a student who is multiply disabled or was born totally blind, something like that, right? So long story short of saying that, even if we wanted to pay for a product like this that's going to run in the anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000 range, we're still working on that. The federal appropriation as is today, it would cripple it, right? So a state would purchase maybe one of these devices, but then they wouldn't be able to get their textbooks, their physical textbooks, or they won't be able to get their Braille paper or other things like that because they've already spent the money on this. So what we've started to do is work with the Department of Education and our federal government connections to essentially increase or create a separate fund that is dedicated specifically to high-tech initiatives. Because even today, what's happening is we're seeing states choose not to purchase technology with the federal appropriation funds because they have to sacrifice too much in order to get that technology. So the way that anyone who's listening here in the United States can help is go to your representative, your regional, local representative, and tell them the story of why a multi-line refreshable Braille display would have changed your life if you were a blind individual in education, or if you were working with kids today, how that could impact their education today.
And it's sad that there has to be such a balancing act for something that would be so plainly helpful to so many people.
Yeah, it's a challenge, but I will say, at least the initial meetings that we've had with the folks at the federal level have been really positive. I think this is a story you don't really need to know much about our field to understand.
Yeah.
So that's been really positive.
Good. Well, I hope that those talks go well. Speaking of talks, we only have about 2 minutes left here, and there's a couple more things I want to ask you about. You mentioned that you're working on, in addition to the new tech and the new software, you're working on a new ebook standard for Braille books. How does that work? I'm really interested in this, like this kind of file format stuff. I don't know. It sounds a little dry, but honestly, I think it's really cool.
It's another example of something that's not changed in 40, 50 years. So the standard for Braille today is the Braille Ready format, or BRF, or in some countries it's BRA, BRL. It's basically a .txt file for Braille. Essentially, it's an ASCII text file. There's no markup. And what's really funny is that our Braille transcribers today, they use tools that actually create markup. They're saying this is a table, this is a heading. But then when they say file, save as BRF, all that markup gets thrown away.
Yeah.
And it's just a ASCII text file, essentially. The reason being is because it's used to be embossed, right? It's embossed on paper. So the first problem we had to look at is, if you're using an ebook reader, how can we take advantage of the standards like EPUB and DAISY today? And we've been really lucky to have a ton of interest from over 30 organizations and countries around the world, along with the DAISY Consortium, who's helping us basically create this new eBRF standard, which gives you sort of the full integrity of formatted Braille while utilizing the markup that you're given from things like EPUB and things like that. So now if a student does want to go to chapter 5, they can do a command on their device and say, go to chapter 5, and it'll jump to that at that point.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love I love this. We're updating. I mean, it's long overdue, like you said. We just have just a second left, but I know that you've got coming up this year, in addition to this tech, we've got an SDK coming out. Is that right? Can you tell us a little about that?
Well, coming out is a strong way of putting it, but we're currently working on it. APH and HumanWare have never built an SDK, right? So we're kind of building the airplane while we're flying it here.
Right.
But our hope is, this is going to create and generate so many new ways of interacting with tactile experiences, right? And APH is not so bold to think that we can come up with every single one of these. I know there's brilliant people out there that have a ton of opportunities that they could think of to create new experiences. And so we are building a software development kit that will initially be released to sort of what I'm calling a trusted partners circle of organizations. Folks who want to get involved can email DTD, Dynamic Tactile Device, DTD at aph.org. And I see all of those emails. Let me know if you're at all interested in developing for this. But the reality here is that we know that this is just the beginning. And in order to really have this technology reach its full potential, we need to unlock sort of the full development community to start to come up with some really awesome ideas. I am most excited for what we can do with tactile gaming. That's something that as a blind student myself, I did not get a ton of gaming opportunities. And so, I think about our students today and how gamified learning is and how so many of our blind students are not able to participate in that. So really excited about what's to come on that.
Absolutely. Yeah, a lot of things to be excited about. I can't wait to see how it all comes together. But that is the end of our time. Thank you, Greg, for coming and talking to us about this, and really looking forward to hearing where it goes next.
Oh, thanks for the opportunity, Devin, and thanks for everybody's interest.
Hey, Greg and Devin, that was great. And Greg, remember, you owe me an email. Next up, we're going to actually be talking to the people who built the guts to the dynamic tactile display. As joining us is going to be Eric Kim and Ki Sung, and it's going to be moderated once again by Devin Coldaway.
The Dot Pad, How the Bible Inspired a Breakthrough. Moderator Devin Coldaway, speakers Eric Ju-Yoon Kim and Ki Kwang Sung.
Thank you. And thank you, Eric and Keith, for coming for Sight Tech Global. I'm really excited to talk to you again. It's always interesting to talk with someone who's doing a real technological innovation in an area that it hasn't been standing still, but it has struggled to move forward over the last few years. The Braille e-reader, essentially. Can you tell me, maybe just give yourselves a brief introduction and tell me why you got into this space to begin with?
Hi, Devin, thank you for introductions. I'm Eric, co-founder and CEO of Dot. He obviously gonna introduce himself, so I'm gonna just briefly introduce how he started. So when Ki and I was in college, we went to the church and we saw really big Braille Bible, and we got really shocked. And we were kids who really admire Silicon Valley culture. So we wanted to do meaningful thing to the society, and that's why we decided to start Dot. And obviously, as you mentioned, Devin, there were obviously technological, there were pretty much there was no innovation in this field. So that's what we felt. So we really wanted to disrupt, and we really wanted to make an impact, huge impact. So we started to develop a full page Braille display since 2015, and around 2019 we succeeded initial development, and right now we have a technological leadership in this industry.
Cool. And Ki, you want to give us your side of that story?
Yeah. So yeah, as Eric mentioned, so we started this company, when we were doing different startups. So because we went to church together, and then we saw the gigantic Braille book, and then we felt like there should be a lot of things to change. So that's why we started developing the full page digital textbook. So right now we're, we got to the point. So we're happy to share our experience and also like technology about the Dot Pad.
Yeah, so I think maybe it would help to set the stage just a little bit to talk about what was there before. I mean, obviously you have the printed Braille books, but you also had a few single line e-readers. What was out there when you started doing this?
Can you go
So
first?
yeah, we had a blind roommate, and he was like bringing like the Braille Bible, and then we noticed that if we translate the normal Bible into Braille, it becomes 22 volumes. So he just cut the Bible and then bring the one by one to the church, and then read the every single line on the Braille text Bible. So at the time we were listening to the iPad or iPhone, whatever the digital contents, but he was like bringing the giant Braille book. So we, like we were shocked actually. And we thought that we need to make some Braille type like iPhone or iPad for the visually impaired people. Yeah.
Tell me about what you ended up using as what you ended up creating, because you can't just say like, oh, I think I'll just make a full page, Braille e-reader. It's like it's such a huge sort of technological endeavor. Where did you even start with something like that? Did you start with the dots themselves? Did you start with the previous technologies and look at those? Like, where did you begin, and how did that develop into how the dot is today?
It was a really long journey. Um, First, I think we set the we decided the mission. So our mission at first was creating affordable and innovative technology for blind people in the world. That was our mission. So our whole technology focus was creating affordable technology. So and around that time there was like Apple Watch was there, everyone talking about it. So we thought, how about we create a Braille smartwatch? Uh, and that's, I think, really good size and small enough size for MVP. So we started with that idea, and our goal was creating that a watch below $300. So obviously the Braille technology that goes inside targeted really low price. So we could actually start with that mission, and we met so many professors and people, organizations in this industry. And especially we met a lot of technicians that have different technological background. And we found out there are some possibilities that we could actually make this happen through magnet technology. So we met a lot of magnet technicians, experts in this area, and we started with a prototype, and we took, I think, around 3 years to make Braille smartwatch. And since smartwatch is really small size, we could actually create small technology. I think that was really lucky. So that technology could actually contribute the full page tactile display that we are creating right now. And that technology is affordable, obviously. So we could actually create, more affordable and competitive price point of technology in this sector. And obviously it was really hard. There were so many things happened while we until now. So I mean, I'm just happy that he and I still in this company, and we are keep creating innovation. Yeah.
I'm curious about the actual the dot itself, the cells that you created. We don't have to get into too much like technical and engineering detail, but what's different about the cells that you created compared with some of the ones I've seen going back 5, 10, maybe 20 years in research organizations? They have these little devices, but they haven't been small enough, or they haven't been durable enough. How did you come up with the design for your cells that it could fit in a smartwatch, and small enough that it could end up being a grid of thousands of them.
So, we were creating this Braille smartwatch first. Obviously, I'm wearing this, and this is little tiny smartwatch. We need to have the 4 cells of the Braille and also the PCB and everything, so we can connect with the iPhone or iPad. So at the time, we were looking like different technologies, like including piezoelectric or electropolymer technologies. But those technologies was really big and expensive. That was a problem. So the piezoelectric, the size of that is like my hand. So we could not fit the technology inside of the watch. So we cannot use the current existing technology. We need to make another electronic magnetic actuator for the new type of small size of Braille display. So after that, we gather all the magnetic or electronic engineers in Korea, and then we reached out, luckily, sound engineers. So
that's right.
They were specialized, the vibrations and magnetic whatever speaker, technology. So we were, we got together like 10 people, and then creating ideas. And after 2 years, after spending a lot of money, like our seed and Series A round. And we, succeeded making the small size of the electromagnetic actuator that, finally fit to the watch. So that was our, the technological initiative. And so we created the dot watch, but we had some, issues on that, because the Braille smartwatch is only displaying the Braille characters. So it has some spacing between the lines to distinguish 2 different lines characters. But to develop the tactile graphic, the dot pad, we needed to reduce the line between the cells. So our lab, the sound engineers, they started working the second, the phase of the technology, and then it took like 4 years after that. It's a lot of time.
Wow.
But we succeeded making the new type of the Braille actuator cell, so that we can put the single line with the same spacing, so that we can create the graphic informations here without any disruption. So
Interesting. Yeah, it was such a long process, but it sounds like you involved so many smart people. I'm curious about what kind of feedback you got when you first put it out there, maybe when you got your smartwatch into the hands of people who were using it. What did you find out about the tech that you had used? Was it not durable enough? Did it not go up high enough? Did you want to put it up halfway? What was how has the technology changed over the last few years as you have iterated on it?
Yeah, thank you for the great question, Devin. Back then, I think it was really, we were really lean. So we got so many feedbacks around the world. And luckily at the time we got a lot of news coverage about us, because the concept itself was, I think, creative. So a lot of people liked it. And because of that, our investors around that time had really high expectations. So I think we were like really desperate at the time, and a lot of customers gave really good feedbacks. But like as a startup, founders, you want to show growth, right? So we needed to sell, but a lot of customers gave us feedback like, oh, how about, what if I, like waters spill into the actuators. How you're gonna prevent that, and how you're gonna protect the actuators. Can you put more actuators, like 12 cells or 20 cells on the watch? And so there are just so many ideas and challenge, and obviously people started to compare dot watch with Apple Watch. So we could Apple is giant company, so Apple Watch had so many functions, like health functions and everything. So we tried to put that functions on the dot watch, but it was really hard. Market expectation was really high, and what we could achieve is compared to that is really low. So, but we got, based on that feedbacks, really crucial feedback, we grew a lot, and our engineers naturally they could improve our technology, by customer-driven way. So, but I think a lot of customers gave us the ideas and the directions towards the path. So, it was really natural that we could make. So the technology that we used for the watch was D1, its first generation, and that the technology that we are using for the pad and tactile display is the second generation. And second generation is based on all the feedbacks around the world from our customers.
Gotcha. And once, it's funny that you were talking about comparing with Apple Watch, because the last time I talked with you was when you were working with Apple to work on their tactile graphics API. I think I got the name right. And because that's a way of displaying directly what's on an iOS screen on the dot pad, which is just such a cool, fundamentally such a great capability. And it opens up so much just as a starting point. And I know you're just getting started in a lot of ways. Can you tell me a little bit of what it was like to work with Apple on that? What do they like to work with? Did they contribute a lot, or did you get to work around what they had set out? Tell me about that.
So with the Apple, actually, there was also a long journey. We met the right person at Apple like 4 years ago at the CSUN conference. We were talking about how we can develop the HID Braille standard for everyone, so that PC and Android OS, iOS can support any Braille devices compatibility. And at the time, I met one guy from Apple. He was really enthusiastic at making something accessible in this industry. And we kept talking about the accessibility in the world, what we can build and how we can impact the world. After like 2 or 3 years, I developed a prototype of the tactile display, and then I showed it around. And then he was the first, the person that I showed the prototype of the graphic display. And then I said, we need to do something here with Apple. So at the time, Apple was doing some different the trials about providing the graphic information to blind people, like making some different tones of the sound for delivering the chart information. So they were very excited, get into the development with the dot pad, tactile graphic display. So okay, well, we gotta impact something, and then we gotta make the compatibility between the iPhone and iOS and the dot pad, and to deliver a whole graphic user interface at this moment the blind people cannot access. We need to deliver the user graphic interface to the visually impaired people through the dot pad. So that was like 2 years ago, and then we started developing some APIs to capture whole graphic information and also text information from iOS, and then the convert that information into tactile way, and then display on the pad. So it took a lot of times, but it's already on the public API on the iOS software. And Apple and us, we were getting a lot of feedback from the market as well about the API, and then based on that, they're developing some more the functionality based on that API, such as making the keynote accessible, or numbers accessible, so that blind people actually can access the whole documentation tool, so that they can make some productivity on that.
Gotcha. That sounds interesting that we're working with them on that. Obviously, they're very motivated. I've talked with a lot of people at Apple about their accessibility efforts, and they seem genuinely motivated to work with folks like you who are doing some new tech. Excuse me. But of course, iOS is just one platform out of many. It's a big one, a huge one that is really good to be on. But now that you've sort of proved out you can work with iOS, you can do this kind of thing, you can do these graphics. What are some of the places or platforms or services that you are hoping to get into, or that you're already working on?
So after the collaboration with Apple, we thanks to you, Devin, we write an article about it at TechCrunch, and everyone saw that. So at the time, we luckily got in touch with right people in Google. So they are really excited about having those kind of technology with the Android OS and Chrome OS. So they haven't started yet, but they are talking about this internally, like at Google, and then hopefully in near future we can also connect with the Google platform pretty soon. And also the one big thing is about NV Access. NVDA software, screen reader software from NV Access is one of the top, the most used screen reader in the world on PC, Windows OS PC. And they're a nonprofit organization, and we made some donation to them. And then they are willing to make some collaboration between NVDA and the iPad. So right now we are working on connecting those two platforms, so that in near future, blind people can access the Microsoft Office, the whole Microsoft Office functionalities, so that in their schools or in their jobs, in everywhere, they can write their thoughts on the Word file, and then access the whole chart and table information from Excel or PowerPoint. So our goal, we are making with them, is to enhance the productivity of the blind people in their daily life. So that's the top, the news from the dot.
Totally. Yeah. Oh, it's great to hear you working with Microsoft, Google, Envy. This is like a who's who in like accessibility world. I think that's fantastic. I guess the obvious question here then is, beyond making it possible for the device to work with these services, how do you get the device into the hands of the people who need it? I know that every hardware company in the world has been having trouble getting enough chips, shipping, manufacturing, packaging. Everything has been slow, more expensive than usual. So how do you plan on getting your device into the hands of people who want to buy one, or have one assigned to them by their company or their whoever? How do you, is there a way to do that are they buying it themselves? Is it being covered by grants or companies? Like, tell me how you're making that happen.
Yes, Devin, thank you for a great question. through the Dot Watch, we learned a lot, as I mentioned, and Dot Watch was solely a B2C product. So there was so many hardships managing all the customer service, managing all the shippings and everything. So Dotpad, our kind of core strategy here is work with really passionate partners around the world. And we also work with the government and organization. And one of the greatest partnership that we have so far is the partnership with APH and HumanWare. So I think
Right.
they are also in the SciTech Global. So they are all really prominent players and prestigious market leadership that they have. It's amazing. So we are collaborating with our technology to create next generation education device. So recently, APH announced on their NFP convention and their annual convention that it will be really huge. They called it Holy Grail Braille. So we're really excited, and we are supporting with our whole, you know, capacity of engineering right now. So you know, through their network and distribution channel, I think a lot of schools in the US will be able to access these kind of, you know, our technology and also all the software that we are creating together. So that's, I think, the one way. And I think we're going to do the same things in many countries, not just education sectors like rehabilitation and some like HR department, like big tech companies. So I think solely, I think we're gonna focus on B2B and B2G channel, and I think by end of next year or early 2024, we're gonna start a B2C approach. But we don't have any we don't have any plan yet for B2C markets. So we serve, you know, our partners and important, you know, strategical partners around the world is our main focus right now. Help them.
Gotcha. It makes sense. And so where does the actual device that you've developed that Key showed us, is that like going to be a reference design for people to modify if they want to, or is that ultimately you do want to sell that, you know, 100 of them to, you know, Oracle or Salesforce or whatever? Like, do you plan on selling those devices to people, whether it's, you know, a government or a corporation or something?
Yeah, I mean, so in the US, we're collaborating with IPH and HumanWare. So we respect our, you know, wonderful partners. So we're supporting just like display area, so they can make their own the product and then the form factor, so that we can you know, fulfill the needs of the students in the schools. But different, you know, the country, we are also trying to, you know, work with the partners, our partners around the world. So with them, you know, it's up to their needs, I think. So we can also provide the, you know, only the display part, and also we have the, you know, the design, one design of the form factor with the device. So they can also get this one for their local, you know, the partners. So, I mean, we are flexible, so, but we, you know, respect our current partners, APH and HumanWare. So with them, we are doing the US market, but rather than that, we're also looking for our great partners too.
And one additional thing is there are so many. So I think, you know, we opened graphical user interface world. So I think there are so many things to do, like games, entertainment. We're also researching a lot about how we can make sports available in real time on the pad with the TV broadcasting. So like that, and how about webtoons or YouTube movies? There are so many possibilities. So we are with our global partners, we are researching a lot. How can we make that happen? So right now it's more like intensive research and development phase, and and the partners have ability and budget for research. So I think the first target will be research-oriented organizations for research purpose and some of the distribution. So I think around the world, a lot of developers and students will have in their have our technology in their hand first.
And where do you think, we only have just like a minute left, so I want to hear from both of you. Where are you most excited to see a dot pad or a evolution of the dot pad, whether it's smaller or bigger or on the wall or in a bank or whatever? Where are you most excited to see your technology appear?
Eric?
Key is buying time, throwing it to Eric. Eric, you can go first.
Yeah, I think the first, exciting thing is we made it, and that was our really big goal when we started. And for 30 years, there was lack of innovation in this field, and there was no commercially available technology in this field. And I think we're really happy that we can contribute to the society, especially education field, because our all inspiration is actually came from all the children, like blind children and blind students. Through our technology and a lot of software support, we can enable STEM education. That's amazing. I think we can change their future jobs. That's most exciting part for us. And I think we're putting our life to make that happen. And I think this is really something that you can pursue until you die. This is really great mission, and we really want to change their lives, and we really want to change their family's life through our work. This is amazing thing for us.
Yeah,
I agree. Anything to add, Key?
Yeah, thank you for the time. I mean, basically, Eric and I, the dot and tactile displays our life, the challenge and our mission. And I don't know how we develop this like until when, but right now we think that we can do that like until we die. But like we feel like we are making a monitor like for the visually impaired people, which means we want to reduce the price as much as possible, and so that we're gonna make it really, really affordable, like a monitor we can buy from everywhere right now, and then we can provide this monitor like a display to everywhere. Like we're controlled by monitor actually right now. We have the monitor here, we camera, I have iPad, I have a monitor here. We're getting a lot of information through the monitor. So we want to provide this monitor for the visually impaired people in everywhere for every single visually impaired people, and then bring the graphic user interface for them. So right now, that was like back in like 15 years ago, we had the feature phone, but the Apple brought the iPhone, the smartphone. So after that our life have changed a lot with the graphic user interface. And I mean, like with that graphic user interface, visually impaired people can access the education materials, any documentation tool in their jobs, so that I don't think it is about accessibility, but it's about productivity. So we can, innovate their productivity in their life. And, hopefully the graphic, tactile graphic display can be the window to that point. So that's the most exciting part for me. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I hope that you continue to develop it, and I hope you don't die. I'm looking forward to seeing what you do with it next. And thank you for joining us here today. It's been very engaging chatting with you both, and hopefully I will get a chance to talk with you again soon. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap on dynamic tactile displays. Now, I recall 20 years ago when I first heard about virtual reality, because we would see it in really bad movies in the late 90s like Strange Days and Virtuosity. Now, but fast forward 20 years, I'm now blind, and virtual reality is actually a reality. It's here. Next up, we have a session titled Virtual Reality and Inclusion. What does non-visual access to the metaverse mean? Our moderator is Bill Curtis Davidson from Pete. Over to you, Bill.
Virtual reality and inclusion. What does non-visual access to the metaverse mean? Moderator Bill Curtis Davidson. Speakers Alexa Huth, Brendan Biggs, and Aaron Gluck.
Hello, everyone. I'm Bill Curtis Davidson. I'm really excited to be here today, and I want to thank the Sight Tech Global team for allowing us to come talk with you today about the metaverse and accessibility. We're really excited to talk about some ways that people with disabilities and accessibility advocates are working to make sure these technologies, like augmented, virtual, and mixed reality, accessible to everyone. I'm joined by some amazing panelists today who will share their experiences using these technologies, discuss barriers that exist, and possibilities that the technologies create. And they include Alexa Huth, Aaron, and Brandon. So I'm going to ask each of them to give a quick introduction right now. Alexa, would you like to start?
Of course, it's wonderful to be here today. My name is Alexa Huth, and I am a white woman with teal hair. And I am Pete's Director of Communications. So that's the Partnership on Employment and Accessible Technology. And my connection to the metaverse is growing. So I started losing my eyesight about 13 years ago due to a condition known as lattice degeneration. And I rely on my left eye, but I have a lot of visual challenges. So I'm excited to talk about them today and how the metaverse might make for a more inclusive future. So thank you.
Thank you, Alexa. Brandon?
Yeah, thank you for having me. My name is Brandon Biggs, and I am a researcher that focuses primarily on non-visual maps, so geographic maps and virtual reality. I am blind as well, and I'm basically totally blind, but I do have a little tiny bit of vision. I can see shapes. So primarily, I use audio as my primary modality, and am focused on using audio game conventions and audio games that are games that can be played completely in audio to bring accessibility into the VR and spatial information presentation space. I'm also interested in making headphones, which are the most ubiquitous virtual reality headset, a first-class citizen in virtual reality.
Great, thank you, Brandon. And Aaron Gluck, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Aaron Gluck. I'm a fourth-year PhD candidate at Clemson University, where I actually study accessibility both in autonomous vehicles and in virtual reality. So I started working with VR about 7 years ago, and only took about 2 years to start asking the questions of how do we make VR accessible for those that VR is not currently made for.
Great. I'm really pleased to have each of you here today because you each have such interesting and diverse backgrounds. And really to start off this discussion, I'd like to ask each of you to comment on some of the reasons why you think these newer immersive technologies are exciting to you. What opportunities do they create? And Brandon, I'd like to ask you to start us off.
Yeah, so XR technologies and virtual reality in particular is a fantastic tool to represent social interactions and information as close to the real world as possible, so specifically within social interactions. I find in the interfaces that I work on that the cognitive load is very, very low if you make the interface well, and the learnability is really, really high. One thing that I'm very excited about going forward is that blind people will, for probably one of the very first times in history, be able to socialize with everybody around them at the same level as sighted individuals will have access to non-verbal social interactions that we don't usually have access to in real life. So I think that that's going to expand inclusion significantly. I'm also extremely excited about the haptic information and technology that is being created as part of this virtual reality expansion to the metaverse. So I can't wait till vibrations are only part of the haptic experience. We've got force feedback and textures as well. And I'm very excited that sighted individuals are paying more attention to non-visual experiences as it relates to XR.
Oh, thank you so much. That's really great to hear. And I'd like to ask Alexa to comment next.
Sure. There are a lot of different reasons that I'm excited about immersive technologies. Personally, I grew up loving PC games, just any sort of experience that took me out of the daily world and put me in something interesting. So when I first started with VR, and I tried an art application, it gave me that same feeling I had as a kid when I played Return to Zork. It gave me a sense that I was really entering something new. And I was so excited about it. And I was able to jump into the world of the art that I was creating and really focus on it with my left eye, which is the left eye central vision is primarily what I use. And that has so many applications. Thinking about it from a workplace perspective, being able to maybe expand a presentation that I'm seeing so that I can really actually engage with the content instead of what I generally do, which is pretend I'm engaging with it. So I think there are a lot of ways to close distance gaps, to spark creativity, and to bring kind of a closeness among people if the technology is built with inclusion in mind, of course.
I love that you point out the creativity part, Alexa. As you know, I began my career as a fine artist, so I love the creative aspect of these technologies. You make some great points. Aaron, what's getting you excited about these technologies?
For me, it's really that giving us the chance to really do whatever we want to do in this. We're no longer defied by, our movements are no longer defied by physics. Reality doesn't have to be reality anymore. So it's the question that's always come to me from people that are new into metaverse, virtual reality, augmented reality is, what can you do in those type of spaces? And I hate to use it, but I always use the response of, there's nothing you can't do. So it leads to this open world where anything and everything is possible. Just because it hasn't been done yet doesn't mean that there's not a way to do it. So it really excites me to be able to bring not only new experiences to individuals that maybe wouldn't have them, but also to allow people with different disabilities to access these environments that they wouldn't potentially have access to as well.
Great, thanks to each of you for sharing what makes you excited about these technologies. I'd like to talk next about what's attractive to you as a tech challenge. Each of you mentioned so many different aspects of these technologies, from haptics to audio only experiences or audio primary experiences. And each of these has an incredible amount of technology and engineering behind it that is moving at lightning speed. So what's exciting to each of you about what we're working on in terms of making this set of technologies more inclusive? And I guess I'll start, Aaron, maybe ask you to comment.
Sure. Yeah, for me, it really was the first moment I put on my the first virtual reality set. I felt like I was the person I imagined myself to be as a kid. I was the hero in the story. I was there. I was experiencing it. The moment I took it off, was just hit with this sense of I have to get everyone that I know and don't know into VR. They need to experience it. And so I just spent a lot of time in those first couple of years just learning and growing, trying new things in that experience. And it wasn't actually until a couple of years into it that I was talking with my now advisor, and accessibility was brought up. And I said, wait a minute, VR is really not an accessible medium. It's especially for those with visual impairments, since VR is a visual medium. So what can we do? How can we address that? And so I set myself a challenge. I said, I'm going to figure out something to allow no visuals to be needed to be used in the virtual environment. What's nice, at least with most modern day headsets or VR systems, is you have the ability for head tracking, hand tracking, you've got microphones, you've got haptic feedback, you've obviously got 3D spatial audio. And so by using those, I was able to actually build my first non-visual VR experience, the Enclosing Dark prototype. And so from there, it's just built and grown from that for me. You know, that was a nice, slow, exploratory experience. I've started exploring what does it look like when you need to, without visuals, make instantaneous decisions. And so what's the best method for that? And actually have just started work on a prototype exploring how do you do an equivalent first-person shooter in a virtual environment. So, you know, the challenge as a programmer and developer for how do we make these things that have for so long been a visual-based information processing, how do we do that without the visuals? Gets me up in the morning and allows me to have just a fun time exploring different things.
Well, thank you for sharing those stories and examples. Brandon, do you have anything you might want to pepper in here in terms of the work you've been doing and what challenges you've been addressing?
Yeah,
with your
sure.
work?
Yeah, absolutely. So the biggest challenge that I have is that people think that they've been focusing primarily on visuals, and so there is the whole field of audio and haptics that are very unexplored and significantly underfunded. So you know, the world is twice as big, when 3 times as big if you add on these sounds and haptic experiences, and I think they can be just as interesting as the visual displays. So my challenge has been, how do we present information in what's known as a cross-sensory way so that the information is accessible equally visually, auditorily, and tactilely? And so most of my research has been on how do we make these modalities independent of one another so that we can use them and then eventually combine them together to create a really incredible experience where you can choose what modality you want to use. And so that's the real excitement here, is that we've got you know, the fields of visual data visualization, of visual virtual reality. They've gone, you know, for years, and a lot of stuff has been solved there. There's still many things that haven't, but you know, there's a lot of work in that space, but there's hardly any work in non-visual virtual reality, and that's even bigger than visual virtual reality. So that's a really is super exciting.
I love what you're pointing out there, and I guess I should pause and say to our audience that if you don't know a huge amount about these technologies, one thing that you'll learn more and more is that the hardware is becoming more and more capable of sensing the environment, right? Our movement as a person as we're wearing it, just like our phone is also capable of that. And our phone is also getting more of these capabilities, as well as even some other types of devices, but also sensors of various kinds, cameras, spatial mapping sensors, audio sensors. So as we were just hearing some of these lively examples, I think each of these has a tech challenge to it, right? But first we need to ignite our imagination. And Brandon, I love that you say that this is undertapped, right? People are privileging in a way the visual domain, but really need to unpack these areas. And I think one way that we can and should do that is to understand the barriers that people are having, right? Because then we have problems we can solve for. And I know each of you are exploring that in your own way. Alexa, I would love to ask you to talk about that very topic. Like, what kind of barriers have you felt when you've been using these type of spatial or immersive technologies?
Sure. I think obviously the barriers are different for every person. Because I have very limited peripheral vision, I find that a lot of these experiences place things outside of my visual reach, just by default. And I think it would be wonderful if there was a way to customize. Obviously, accessibility options, there are never enough. But these should be mainstream options as well. Where do you visually focus, if you do visually focus, would be a really important question for me, because it is my left central vision. And when I hop into any sort of an immersive experience, I'm immediately scrambling. Is there a menu bar perhaps below my field of vision? So I'm looking everywhere. It's very overwhelming. In addition to that, I am very light sensitive. And so at any point, this is a very bright room for me that I'm currently in, and it's just because we're recording. I usually like to be in a very dark environment. So when I put on an HMD, I am, again, overwhelmed by how bright it is. It's pretty painful. If that could be customized down for every immersive experience that I do, that would be wonderful. So I think really a lot of the barriers are fixable if we are thinking beyond the pretty. We're not thinking about the colors and the, oh, should we put something on the virtual wall? That's great, but that's something that's going to be virtual clutter for me. And with the outside world, the physical world being not built for me already, I can only control my apartment. And I would love to be able to control my virtual space as well. So I think there are a lot of barriers, but they are fixable for me personally.
Yeah, I think we'll talk a little bit more about design specifically later, but I think one of what occurs to me is the first step in inclusive design is recognizing exclusion and then using that as a way to design for problems. And what occurs to me is when you talked about dimming the display or focusing, these are things that have been done in other areas, like in gaming, for example. We have accessibility features in games where you can highlight, core actors, or to turn off audio, extra audio. There's a lot of things that we can learn from other media. But it does require us at first to recognize exclusion. Number one, because we don't want exclusion, we want inclusion. But in order to do that, we also need to recognize the value for others. Brandon, do you have any barriers that you'd like to talk about, especially for people who are blind?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely none of the mainstream virtual reality platforms are usable for me right now. So I'd say that's probably the biggest problem. And it's not that we don't know how to do this, it's that none of the platforms have really contacted the right people or figured out they haven't really implemented any of the changes that are needed for this. That part of that problem is we go back to the idea that virtual reality is visual. So I've worked with people on the WebXR specification, and it was so inherently visual initially. I had to go through and tell them it's actually not inherently visual. We just don't necessarily have the correct displays at the moment to show these in different modalities. But headphones are there. They've been around for a really long time, and if you talk to blind people about head-mounted displays, they will say, I don't need the camera, so the visual aspect of it. So why do I even need this thing? It's not useful. So the headphones, we wear these for 14 hours a day, and they work perfectly. And a lot of them have head tracking now, so they are full VR headsets. Yeah, basically, audio games have suggested many of the conventions that we can use for social interactions and interacting with the environment and creating an immersive virtual world. And so the visual virtual reality experiences just need to become as immersive as auditory audio games.
Great. And while we're mentioning, thank you for all of that, Brandon. That's really wonderful points you're making. And while we're mentioning gaming, I should say that the adoption of these technologies, of course, virtual reality gaming is there's plenty of that going around. But I think the adoption of the hardware is skewing toward enterprises who are maybe can spend more money on these devices. They're still not as commonplace as they will be. And also they're changing rapidly. And so what we're seeing is enterprises or workplaces beginning to use these in different ways. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. But as we're talking about barriers, maybe to focus a little bit on, we talked about the barriers and how these exist today. And while we're still working on all of it, there is an emotional or mental impact when, if you are, let's say you do get a new job, and you're offered a training scenario that utilizes virtual reality. What happens if you're blind or have low vision or limited vision? What if the company rolls that out and hasn't really thought through that? I'd like to ask Alexa to comment a little bit on that, because we do so much at Pete talking to the employers or adopter crowd. Alexa, would you like to expand on that?
To pull that thread that you started, so imagine that I have started a new job and I chose not to disclose my disability, which is absolutely fine. But then they give me a virtual reality onboarding experience and expect me to complete it within 2 or 3 days. That's not going to happen. I can maybe be in an immersive environment for 20 minutes tops. So my choices there are either disclose, which is a forced disclosure, which should not be happening, or I would have to fake it until I made it and hope that they're not getting records that perhaps it's taking me a week or longer to complete these modules that they expected to have done. These are very exhausting challenges, and they're things that people with disabilities are confronted with daily, multiple times a day. And it shouldn't be happening, especially in the workplace, because that is just such a barrier. And so I'm glad we're talking about the mental and emotional impact of it, because there are so many times when I'm confronted with these things that aren't made for me. Like I said, I can only control the apartment environment. I can't control the virtual environment or the physical environment. And we need to think about them very, very carefully before we roll them out to employees, or even just people suggesting them and saying, oh, this will help, this will fix it. Be careful with that language, because a lot of times you don't know what set of barriers a person has. And so unless the technology is designed flexibly and co-designed with people with disabilities, which I know we're going to get into design later, but there is no way that you can imagine my experience. And so that won't be baked in, and I will still be excluded. And so I think it's a great thing that people are onboarding with exciting new technology, but it does need to be inclusive first.
Great points. And I think as we're talking about all of these, what can you do, right? There is fast moving development, as Brandon and really Aaron and Lex have mentioned. While there's no perfect solution, there are a lot of things that are happening to advance this. And I'd like to ask each of you to comment on that. So, I mean, these include areas like human interactions, right? Like communicating, interacting with other real humans through these technologies, or what's happening with hardware and fallback options, input options, et cetera. And then also in the content, 3D content space. So maybe I can start out with Aaron, see what comments you have in this area.
Sure. So my specific focus is looking at how do we make commercial off-the-shelf virtual reality systems accessible. So, they include, an Oculus Quest 2. If you go to the store and buy one, you have head tracking, hand tracking, you have controllers that have haptic vibrations, you have glass spacers to, assist with glasses. You have a microphone that can use a voice user interface. So there's a lot of things that are built in to these devices and equipment. The problem that I specifically see is that we're not using them to help make it accessible. They're just there to try and add to the visual experience. So it's not, like Brandon was saying, it's not looking at how do we make these the main focus rather than lowering the visual requirement. So, the pieces for the most part are there. You can, it shouldn't be hard to change the contrast level or the brightness of the display. That would help Alexa out a lot. Those things are there. What it takes is the time and the realization that, hey, we could do this. It doesn't take that much. And I know a lot of researchers are starting to explore these areas. The trick becomes, how do we take what's being researched in academic labs or industry labs? How do we get that to the manufacturers and the developers? And I know we'll talk about that as we go forward, but it's really that disconnect between those of us who are passionate about making this experience as accessible as possible. And I know that's going to be a step-by-step, feature by feature, modification by modification process. It's not, sadly, going to be a snap your fingers and it's all done overnight. But we need to spend that time. We need to show that the research is being done. We're proving that these things can be done, that we can treat immersive environments in such a way that they're accessible, get that into the hands of those that are producing them, that are making the games, making the experiences, doing the training, the virtual trainings, things like that. We need to get them on board and get them connected, bring everybody together and have those conversations.
Yeah, those are great points. Having worked in this area in some detail, and even my most previous role at Magic Leap, I know a lot of these areas are literally being developed or have recently been developed in the last few years. Things like voice commands to open up applications instead of using a launcher, for example, that's visual and requires a pointing device, or having a segmented dimmer, which is now available in the released product Magic Leap 2, to focus on content, right? That is, something that you, want to focus on that could be useful. But again, these things are being developed literally in real time almost. So it's like a moving train, isn't it? So Brandon, what thoughts do you have? I'm curious about some of the platforms or developments that are happening that will be useful for accessibility.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're building one of these tools, the thing that's going to get you the fastest way to accessibility is to find designers or human-computer interaction experts who have the lived experience. They're very few and far between, but they do exist. And so if you can find those people, they're going to get you there the fastest, because they're going to have the research in the background to really take the platform to the next step. The little bit slower option, and both people with lived experience and everybody else should do this, is to find other users with the lived experience and test it and test the different interactions. But for example, with lived experience dictating some of the interactions that really work, the non-visual experience is something that blind people have solved for themselves. They've made virtual reality for the last 20 years, and it's really been extremely immersive. And so I'm in the midst of writing up a really comprehensive paper on all the interactions that take place in these non-visual virtual reality experiences. And I've asked people how they would expand those out to some of the interactions that are in visual virtual reality that aren't necessarily in the auditory virtual reality space. So a lot of it has to do with really basic elements, and contact me if you want more information. But it's stuff like naming every single interactable mesh in the area, having collision sounds or having footstep sounds, having some kind of way to scan around the area with using a person's screen reader, and having text information, and having menus where you can interact with the different elements in your room. And so there's a bunch of different interactions that you can do to make your non-visual your virtual reality experience non-visual. And blind people have been building these for themselves for a really long time. And so it's just kind of a matter of looking at what they've already done. And most interaction researchers who are blind themselves will be able to answer this. And I'm sure it's the same for other people with lived experiences with different types of disabilities. So low vision individuals who are hard of hearing or deaf, or all those different groups of people. So yeah, I think that that this is an area that really needs more highlighting. What have blind people or people with disabilities done already in this space that hasn't hit the mainstream stage yet?
I +1 to everything that you just said. To me, what's so exciting about this is really that hacking that lived experience is really a lever for innovation. And I love what you said. If you want to do it the quick way, which who doesn't want to do that, right? You need to have people with these diverse lived experiences on your team, because they're going to come up with angles that you would never explore on your own because of your lived experience. I can speak as someone who does not consider myself an accessibility and inclusion advocate, but I am not a person with a disability. So I myself count myself in that club, right, of people who need to interact and feel like that's imperative. It's not an option. And I love some of the work we're doing with 3D content descriptions with groups like Equal Entry and the XR Association, where we're literally working with people who are blind or have low vision to figure out how do you actually navigate inside containers of space, right? At the high level, going down into an environment, going down into a building, into rooms, and into spaces within rooms, and even furniture. How do you actually experience that, number one, in the real world, the physical world, and what would you expect to have in virtual? And that is so productive to work with people who have the lived experience. So I just wanted to kind of emphasize another concrete example of things that are being done right now. With the time we have left, I want to quickly ask Alexa to talk a little bit about workplace, because at Pete, we do quite a bit along that line, working in the way we do. Alexa, what are your comments about the future possibilities and imperatives for workplace?
I think that there are a lot of interesting applications. So as you mentioned, at peatworks.org, we have an inclusive XR and hybrid workplace toolkit, and that will help you get a sense of exactly what you need to do to be understanding how these technologies can apply to the workplace in inclusive ways, what you should be looking for, how you should be using them. We also have a joint white paper with the XR Association that brought some really interesting applications for the workplace. So the one that I think is exciting is training for, especially in the medical industry. So if you're a person like myself and you're often at the eye doctor, often they'll have a training doctor come in and look at my retinas. And so I usually go through 3 or 4 doctors before I'm done with a typical visit. If there was skills-based virtual immersive training, perhaps they could understand virtually. And that would be great. I would love training like that. Not that that replaces lived experience, but in some cases, because I do have a condition that is often not common, I will just say that. And so if people could experience that in an immersive environment and train with it and learn about it, just even to catch the signs, because mine weren't caught early enough because it wasn't something the person was expecting to see. So training in the healthcare field, I think, would be a really great application, and it's already happening in certain hospitals and certain training environments. So I think the pandemic really sped that up because people weren't able to do the type of hands-on practice that they were before. So that is something that I look forward to. Not that I would ever begrudge somebody learning from my situation, but I think that there are some really great skills-based training and upskilling that can happen in immersive environments.
Yes, thank you so much. And I'm glad you mentioned our PEAT Inclusive XR and Hybrid Work Toolkit, where we go into the detail, for example, on meetings, which meetings apply to every other use case, right? Which is why we chose that area. What do you need to think about before you try to engage with other people? What do you think about when you are engaging with them? And it's broken down into areas like language and communication mode, right? So if you're communicating, for example, with sign language, how do you actually incorporate that into VR? Like if you're doing a VR meetup, like we do with the Equal Entry, well, you actually may have to put a video feed into it and have a sign language interpreter that's always present. Again, how do you do these things is an evolving art, but we need to do it, and it's important to look at that for inclusion in the workplace. We just have a few minutes left, and I'd like to sort of wrap up by talking about, we've talked about all of these challenges, all these opportunities, and I guess what I'd like to get each of you to comment on is what should designers, developers, and even implementers do now? If they want to get more involved in this, we want a big tent here. I think all of us would agree. How do you get involved? And maybe I can start with you, Brandon.
Yeah, if you really want to get more into non-visual experiences of virtual reality, I would contact the different research institutions that focus specifically on that particular disability. For example, the Smith-Catawba Eye Research Institute is all about vision, and Gallaudet University, I think, has a research institute that's on individuals who are deaf and hard of hearing. And so, focus on contacting those places. If you want, low vision stuff, I'm probably a good person to talk to about that. But yeah, also, think about these different disabilities as, a different challenge to kind of create this experience for those individuals, and what input devices or output devices they'd be using. I could go back to this idea of headphones. And once we do have these experiences, how is that going to increase the accessibility of VR for individuals of all different types of abilities? So for example, headphones just happen to be in almost every single household. So it'll decrease the level of adoption required for virtual reality if everybody has the tools already to use them.
Yes, thank you very much. Aaron, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting problem that we're at kind of a tipping point at this point where the information that VR, XR, AR is just not as accessible or equitable of a technology, that more and more people are starting to have these conversations. I think businesses, developers are starting to realize that the ADA laws are going to, as we had with the web, are going to start being enforced in a immersive environment as well. And so being able to start looking at these, I don't want to call them problems, but challenges, that to how do we develop systems that are going to be more accessible. how are we going to develop applications that are going to be more accessible? I think it just leads to kind of a change in the mindset. Here we're going to, we're going to take an extra 2 weeks to get this product out, and we're going to build in, X, Y, Z to give more accessibility to what we're doing. And I think as developers and manufacturers start doing these small things, they're going to see their sales increase. I mean, if you can make something that wasn't accessible to a group of people, let's say, even if it's just 100,000 people that have something specific that you can create an accessibility feature for, you now have 100,000 new potential customers. And not that it's about that bottom dollar, but from a manufacturing development standpoint, it often is that, we have a budget, we've got to go with it. So I think the manufacturers, designers, they really, like I had mentioned before, they need to spend the time, reach out to researchers that are looking into that, reach out to the community of people with the disabilities that they're interested in making accessible, bring them on, bring in a consultant, do co-designers, have someone who has that lived experience to be able to help get that through. I think that's where we're going to really see, an uptick in those accessibility features as we go forward. And there is plenty of room for that to be done. So just need to realize, taking an extra couple weeks to get a brand new game out, people can live. It's okay. Make it more accessible for everyone.
Thank you so much. I totally agree. Alexa, please give us your thoughts really quick.
Before I do, Brandon had said people could reach out to him. Brandon, could you give an email address or something where they could reach you?
Yeah, brandon.biggs@xrnavigation.io. And it should be somewhere in the meeting notes.
Perfect. Aaron, would you like to give contact details too before I wrap up with my answer?
Sure. Easiest way to get in touch with me is amgluck, Gluck, @clemson.edu.
Great. I just didn't want to shout out Pete Works without giving everybody a chance. But I absolutely think that Brandon and Aaron have nailed it. And I would just encourage people to think about digital curb cuts. So making sure that you're not thinking about it just as, oh, I'm helping X people. No, it's better for the entire design. So you need to consider what benefits there will be for everyone. Closed captioning is a great example. So will your product have next closed captioning if you design with people with disabilities at every stage? So that's just what I'd like to advocate for over and over again.
Great. Thank you so much to all three of you for an excellent discussion. I feel energized every time I have these discussions, and I have a lot of them, but this has been really special, and I really appreciate each of your unique perspectives. And again, please get involved in the community. XR Access is another community at xraccess.org you can get involved in. You can get involved in the XR Association, one of the leading trade associations, at xra.org. And you can also get involved in groups like equalentry.com, who runs an near monthly accessibility VR meetup that people like Aaron have spoken at in the past, and they have an incredible library of recorded sessions as well that are accessible. And then finally, check out Pete, that's PEATWORKS.org. Subscribe to our newsletter, listen to our podcasts, and just stay informed and get involved. We need everyone to make this as good as possible, and it's really important for our future. So I'd like to thank the SightTech Global team again for having us today, and thank all of you for joining us.
I loved gaming before I went blind. I never actually thought I'd get to enjoy it again. But thanks to the hard work by Bill, Brandon, Aaron, and Alexa, That day is coming fast, and I'm really looking forward to getting gaming again. This next session is called Creating the Screen Reader for VR, Alchemy Labs' Cosmonius High. Cosmonius High was released in 2022. It's a first-person game about a intergalactic high school that one reviewer says has the charm of a Nickelodeon kids show. Our moderator is James Rath, a legally blind gamer and filmmaker who was also an early tester of Cosmonius High. Over to you, James.
Inventing the screen reader for VR, Alchemy Labs' Cosmonius High. Moderator James Rath, speakers Peter Galbraith and Jasmine Cano.
Thanks, Brian. James here. So I'm super excited to share this conversation with Jasmine and Peter from Alchemy Labs. This is one of the things I've been interested in for a while, is how do us from the blind community enjoy virtual reality? So if you two don't mind introducing yourselves, Jasmine, we'll start with you.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Jasmine Cano. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the Accessibility Product Manager at Alchemy Labs, and my job is to ensure that accessibility features are researched, tested, and prioritized. And I'm very excited to be here.
Hi, and I'm Peter Galbraith. I'm the accessibility engineer at Alchemy Labs. I've been working on designing and building a lot of features and systems for accessibility in our games. And my pronouns are he, him.
So we're here today to talk a little bit and show some of the experimental options that you guys have been including with your game Cosmonius High. It's a really well-acclaimed VR title, and it has been creating a reputation with being accessible with other features, but now you're exploring opportunities in vision accessibility. Could you talk a little bit about the game itself, but also how you came down this route of wanting to make your game more accessible for low vision users on VR?
Absolutely. So Cosmonius High is a game about being a new kid in an alien high school. It's there to be inclusive. We've created this wonderful, friendly environment, and we've been doing some accessibility work in Cosmonius High and our previous titles, Job Simulator and Vacation Simulator as well. And we believe that accessibility is very important to the future of the industry in both video games and also in virtual reality and technology in general.
And to add to that, after each game, Alchemy Labs has been taking a big swing at unsolved areas of accessibility in XR. So previously, the team looked at subtitles, and this time we asked the question, could a user with low or no vision play our VR games? So we don't know if our efforts will be successful, yet we feel it's important to try. And while our solution is not comprehensive for all users with vision-related disabilities, we feel our vision accessibility update will make huge strides towards making XR more inclusive.
That's awesome. And I'm one of my favorite things about this whole thing is a lot of folks who are getting into accessibility are oftentimes learning as they go, listening to the community or getting those folks who need these features involved with those projects. Can you share with me some of the challenges that your team faced when working on this initiative?
Totally. So one of the bigger challenges was playtesting. At the start, we wondered, how can we reach our target audience for playtesting? And it took a lot of searching, and we finally found a third party called VR Oxygen. We work with them to find playtesters that match the profile of the people we're looking for. So starting that relationship was awesome because finding organizations and companies who can help test for accessibility, specifically in VR, that was a huge challenge. Additionally, it's taken months to actually find people with the equipment that's required and who can work during our office hours as well. That was another challenge, but Thankfully, we've had a number of playtesters that resulted in lots of learnings for our team and discoveries we can share with others in XR working on this.
Yeah, there were a lot of interesting challenges there. Remote playtesting provided its own set of technological hurdles that we had to overcome. But I think, through clever use of technologies like Zoom and, being able to screen share and do things like that, we were able to effectively mitigate the challenges that arise from that. Beyond just the testing sides of things, though, we also had a lot of challenges in the design and implementation process. So one of the big things here that was a challenge that was mentioned earlier is that Cosmonious High is an already released title. So we're working on a finished product, which means there is a lot of stuff that has been locked in and can't really change too much. It's, systems built on top of systems. And so it becomes challenging at times to add a new feature without breaking or changing the core experience of the game. It's been a bit of a challenge, but we've been working on it, and I think we've been doing a pretty good job of building this into our systems, and hopefully in a way that it's something that we can bring forward into future titles. Additionally, there's a lot of design challenges around the technology itself. So a big thing we have here is our 3D screen reader sort of technology. It's meant to allow us to get any object in the game of importance and provide auditory feedback on what that item is and give the player context about the world around them. It's a little more challenging than your traditional screen reader, as it needs to, in a traditional screen reader, you've got a flat page layout and the screen reader can go through the different elements. In a spatialized environment such as VR, though, where everything exists in this virtual space, getting the information you want is challenging. So we use indicators like hovering your palm over an object or pointing with your fingers at an object in the distance to help establish intent of what you are trying to get information about. And I could show a quick clip of that if we want. Let's do that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Hovering over new student ID card number 5. A student ID with a purple edge for the new kid. Hovering over new student ID card number 4. Hovering over new student ID card number 3. Aiming at registration field. A glowing platform. The save file you are loading is determined by which student ID you place here. Aiming at registration field. Hovering over subtitle drawer. Grabbed subtitle drawer. A pull-out drawer containing a pop-up tool for selecting subtitle options.
Pick an ID. Any will do.
So what you can see in this video is object highlighting and descriptions based on the object that is being pointed at. So the pick-upable objects have a light blue highlight around them. Other key interactables have this green border that helps you understand that there is something to do here. So if you're a person with low vision, there's a good high contrast outline. And something that doesn't show up in these videos is that there are also haptic pulses in the controller to help you feel when you are on or off of an object, and know that you can trigger a request for more information from our screen reader type technology.
Do you mind if we talk a little bit more about the controller of VR? So just for those who haven't been, maybe for those who haven't experienced VR, essentially, whether it's an application or a game, you're wearing a headset that can track your motion, orientation, and you can move at a 360-degree angle. And with those, you tend to get two different wireless or wired motion controllers with analog sticks and a few buttons for input. But a lot of the input in these types of applications is with your full body motion. Can you talk a little bit about what opportunities do you have to describe what gestures need to be done for maybe a player with low vision or blindness?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the interesting challenges is that many of our tutorials had been very heavily reliant on visuals in Cosmonious High. So teaching the players what button to press on the controller was challenging in an environment where our users may not be able to see the graphics, or may not at least be able to see the graphics clearly. So what we've done is we've developed some language to help us describe these actions spatially to our players. And we do that based on their own physical body in a lot of ways. So when they're holding a controller, there are face buttons on the controller. We can tell the user which face button to press by saying, okay, there's two face buttons on the controller. Press the one that is closest to your wrist. And by having that sort of a mapping, we're able to indicate what the player needs to do. Additionally, one of the things that we wanted for this was we wanted players to be able to interact with this game and use these features without sighted assistance. So for turning on the low vision mode that we've created, it's as simple as telling someone, hold the controller to your ear and then double tap the controller face button that is furthest away from your wrist, or whatever the appropriate button is on the variety of controllers that we support. And we've had to create a language around all of those. But by doing this and having these interactions based like on relatives to the player's own body, they don't have to see as much of the environment early on to begin this sort of journey with our accessibility features. And from there, we have a lot of different ways of interacting that we inform the player of, telling them either to hold their palm at something and then press the button, or aim their fingertips and press the button based on the context. And doing that seems to help a lot.
So we talked a little to that.
Yeah, please.
Sorry. Yeah, so I want to add to that. Early on, our initial designs, it was co-designed with someone who has blindness, and something we use in our game for people to read. They can do a hover where their palm is facing the object, or they can point, like Peter said. And I thought it was really cool to hear that this person said they wanted it to almost be like you're using the force to then know what's around you in this world. And so those are additional ways to describe it as well, as just hover your hand over something or point at something. So we're assuming folks would then put their palm out and point their fingers out.
And with that, haptics obviously play a big role with the controllers to help our brains just kind of realize that feedback and realize the events happening in the game. But I imagine also sound is playing a big role in that experience too. With VR, you have what's called binaural audio, where you have this sort of 3D audio experience, being able to like rotate your head at a 360-degree angle, or even if you move forward in the game, your surroundings, the audio is going to adapt. So things that you may have heard that were right next to you as you move forward are suddenly further away in the distance, and you hear it from that direction. Can you talk about how sound design has played a role in this process, both from just even the base game, but also for the accessibility of the game?
Sure. So sound design is incredibly important to our games, and I would say incredibly important to VR as a whole. We as people are very good at determining where a sound is coming from in our environment. We may not be incredibly precise, but we're pretty good at it. And so it's very important for sounds to be placed where they are in the environment so that you know where to look, where to interact. And this is especially important in this update that we've been working on, because there's so many objects, and being able to indicate to the players where they need to be interacting, it's just very key to getting people to the right locations, and then using the volume of that sound. So if it's far away, it's going to be a little quieter. If it's going to be up close, it's going to be louder, obviously. And that really helps give a sense of where an object is in the environment.
Imagine, go ahead.
No, go for it.
I imagine that, especially true today, but with non-traditional VR games, sound design has definitely become a more, I guess, budgeted component of the game, with the fact that a lot of players now play at PCs with headsets on, whereas maybe 20 years ago, most games were being played on console with just mono audio through their old SRT, or through their
CRT.
old, is it SRT?
CRT.
CRT. I'm getting, accessibility is on the mind, caption files. But yeah, they're old CRT TVs. And so could you tell me a little bit, just as a developer doing VR games, has there been any difference with sound design, or is it even more crucial or important than, say, a non-traditional VR game or non-VR title?
I would say it's more important now than ever. I think there are some additional challenges of, in a traditional game, when you're playing audio from you can play audio so that it's coming out the stereo speakers or coming out the headset. It's not necessarily as important to know all the exact positioning, because you're not necessarily in it yourself. But when it is physically your body that you are moving through the space, it can be very important.
I think what you brought up there was really important to note. With that is you're in a first person point of view, like quite literally, like not just from that visual perspective, like a lot of console or PC games, but you're in control of the body from all fluid movements. So, no, thank you for just clarifying, just kind of adding some more context to that too. Just for those who haven't experienced VR, I think it's important to really help illustrate the difference of gameplay from a player's perspective.
Absolutely. And with regard to some of the work that we've done here, because of how important it's been, we've had to do a lot with prioritizing what audio is important for the player to hear in these contexts. So we end up doing some ducking of audio to make sure that the most important audio is getting heard by the player. So in this case, that would often be the text-to-speech that is being triggered, because that's obviously the player is trying to hear information about the world around them and use that effectively. Additionally, we do some information, or we do some prioritizing and canceling audio as well. So in the video that we showed a little bit ago, there was a moment where I moved from one object to the other while it was still speaking. In that moment, the previous audio was canceled and the new, more relevant audio was played. If we didn't do that, it would become cacophonous and just really hard for players to understand. So it's really valuable to make sure that you're prioritizing the right information.
In addition to that as well, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Adding to the canceling audio there, we also allow players to cancel any of the text-to-speech from objects that are being described when they want. So there's agency there as well. And I gotta say, we learned a lot of this in our playtest. Early playtests did teach us that it's better to duck audio, cancel it here and there. Peter described it as a cacophonous experience, and it's hard to describe it, but it's not great to have lots of audio overlapping, because when you have more than one voice speaking at you, it's hard to understand. In addition to that, having world sounds and music and maybe NPCs speaking, it adds on, and most often it's hard to understand anything that was said in that moment.
Yeah, I think that's really important to remember too, is, you know, some players, when we think about accessibility, it's a very optional or customizable experience for everyone, because everyone's needs may be a little different. Some people's gameplay experience might be a little, you know, on various different levels than others. So, and even if someone maybe comes back to the game months later when a new like DLC pack is available, they might want to get re-familiar with the controls or some of the protocols or practices with the text-to-speech. So I think that's always important to be able to cancel things out when you want, but have it there to remind you what's going on when you need it.
Absolutely.
Now, although Cosmonious High is a game, do you think that these accessibility options that your team has been building could apply to other genres or applications by chance?
Yeah, totally. This isn't specific to our game or VR games exactly. It could be for other VR experiences. So, like a traditional screen reader, we're building this so that people can hear descriptions for objects. There's confirmation of when something was grabbed and released, and that could be that could be compared to when someone selects an option on a traditional screen reader on a 2D screen, and they know if something was selected. And then again, we just talked about canceling audio and then balancing that audio. All of this could be applied to different experiences, not just VR games.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think that this is something where we are trying to design the interactions and see in these, you know, part of the reason Alchemy's been doing these at the end of our products is because we've been using that as, hey, here's a dense, full world, and we are interested to see, okay, how do we make this work for everything that we can in this world? So it's really important that we are supporting a variety of different interactions and different just things in the world. I mentioned that there are differences between objects that you can pick up and grab and objects that are sort of locked to the environment. Different interactions are going to require different approaches, but by using some systemic design and trying to establish some common practices across all of these, we're hopeful that we can find some sort of commonality that can be used in any type of VR, XR, and maybe even AR game or application in the future. I'd love to see this idea of pointing at an object and getting contextual information brought, about it, brought to an augmented reality environment, or other XR spaces as well. So hopefully what we're doing here and the designs that we're putting forward will be helpful to designers of all types.
Oh, can't hear you, James.
Thank you. Sorry. Muted for a second because loud motorcycles are going by. I'm going to back that up real quick. Totally agree with you. And I love that you said just being able to use other applications, I think is such a important thing from a user perspective, because being able to just boot up my headset, and if I had these similar features to even get into the game or find my way around the UI and menus of the platform that I'm using, I think that's really important and helps to set a standard for the developers as a whole that are creating for that platform. But right now, you guys are really leading that. And with that said, like, if another developer sees the work that Alchemy Labs is doing, and they wanted to make their game or application more accessible, what advice would you have for them, or how can they get started?
Well, the first thing I would say is start early. Something I've learned from working on these is that it's challenging to integrate these later on in your projects. And the more solidified your stuff is, the harder it's going to be. I think it can still be done. Again, we have a wonderful team that's built a great game with wonderful bones, so many things. We were actually able to hook into some of our other systems to do this, but some things had to be layered on top. So thinking early on about what you can do is better than trying to retrofit at the end.
One example of this that we can point to in Cosmonious High is early on, the objects were named and had descriptions, so that when we started this work and you could start scanning the objects around and hear their descriptions, it was already there. So we didn't have to manually later on go and type everything. And that's really important because it's just like alt text on media on traditional 2D screens. We have to have it on everything, and it was already there.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I mentioned that we had great bones in our game to sort of build on top of. But at the same time, if you're a developer looking to get into this, and I'm saying, get into things early, understand that doing something is better than doing nothing. You don't have to be perfect the first time. You don't have to do every feature if you can't. Anything that you do that helps someone is a step in the right direction. So, as I think we mentioned earlier, right now, we've been focusing on trying to get users that are blind and low vision to be able to complete our game. I think we're doing really well on the low vision, and I think we've started the process for users with complete blindness, but I think we still have room to go. And I think we still have room to go for users with low vision. But I think by doing something and getting it out there, we're going to enable the collaboration with other developers. And, please take our designs and use them in your game or application. See if they work for you. Let's work together and try and come up with something that, everyone can benefit from.
Absolutely. And you can trust that our designs, we have real feedback, like for real people who've play tested it, who have low vision and blindness. And what we're putting out is just things that we've kind of collaborated on that we know are working. They're successful so far. And in surveys after playtest, people have said that they would recommend it. They would use these features. And it just was great feedback overall. So you can trust that what we're putting out there is really helpful for this game.
And I mean, I think it's to be said also, do your own playtesting. Reach out to real people with disabilities. Reach out to, friends. Reach out to, if you've got a community around your game or application. I'm sure there are people in that community that do have accessibility challenges and would love to have those concerns be heard. And then work with consultants if that makes sense for you as well. People that are a part of these communities, and make sure that the solutions that you're implementing are actually benefiting them. And I think that'll get you a long way if you're just making sure to listen to the feedback of the people who actually need the things you're creating.
Awesome. Thank you. I love to hear about how collaborative and supportive the whole developer industry is just as a whole. I know from my experience as a accessibility consultant, from other developers, just everyone's there to support one another, and we're still trying to figure all this out, right? Like that's the thing is, it's great that VR is now, making these steps to be more accessible, but even the traditional games are still making huge strides and still have a lot of progress to go. So again, thank you for the work you guys are doing. Is there any closing comments or any things that you guys just want to make note of?
Yes, for developers, do accessibility work. It's important. It's the right thing to do.
Yeah. I mean, I echo that sentiment. And again, go out and find the communities around. If you're interested in XR, VR, AR, those things, the XR Association, the XR Access community, so many more are out there and are just wonderful people that are trying to share experiences and trying to share this knowledge so that we can establish this stuff, because VR is still early as a medium. And if we can establish good accessible design practices now, we're not going to be excluding people throughout the life cycle of this hardware and medium as a whole. Hopefully we'll see this become integrated into what is common and expected from VR.
Awesome. Thank you. Again, I'm excited to continue to see how this evolves in this industry.
Thank you, James.
Thank you.
I wonder if we'll look back on the early days of VR accessibility kind of the same way we look back on VoiceOver coming to the iPhone 3GS. Because I remember back in 2009, people saying, well, how's a blind person ever going to use a touchscreen? Thanks so much, Peter and Jasmine. Our next session might not be what you would expect from an event that talks up AI. The next session is called Audio Description the Pixar Way. So while we've been talking about AI here a lot, as you might know if you're involved in the blind tech world, AI is not exactly what we're looking for when it comes to audio description, which is why it's so great that we have Pixar here, because they do things the right way. They bring us some of the best human narration for our audio described titles. Our moderator is Tom Lakowski, Vice President of Accessibility at Comcast. Over to you, Tom.
Audio description the Pixar way. Moderator Tom Lakowski, speakers Anna Capizera, Eric Pearson, Laura Post, and Christina Stevens.
Thanks, Brian. Hello, everybody, and it's great to be here at SightTech Global. My name is Tom Lidkowski, and I am the Vice President of Accessibility for Comcast. Welcome to our panel on audio description the Pixar way. And so we got two major studios represented here today with Pixar, and of course, I'm representing Comcast and NBC Universal. So for those who may not be familiar with audio description, it's narrated descriptions inserted into the natural pauses of program dialogue, and it could be TV or film or even other types of videos that describes the key visual elements of the program. So actions, scene changes, any kind of lower thirds that appear on screen, visual elements that just bring the show or film to life for people who are blind or visually impaired. And of course, we know that with accessibility, when you make a product more inclusive, you build a better product for everyone. And of course, audio description also makes the experience better for many in the audience who are not just blind or have low vision. So we're here with an esteemed group of panelists from Pixar and Deluxe. Deluxe does a lot of the audio description for Pixar and has done some description for us as well in the past. And so why don't we do this to get started? Let's do some introductions. And Eric, I think I'll start with you over at Pixar, and we'll just go round robin here.
That sounds great. Thanks so much, Tom, and thanks for having us here at SightTech Global. Very excited to be here. My name is Eric Pearson. I'm the home entertainment product supervisor at Pixar, which means that I shepherd all of our films out onto the small screen. And one of the things that I've been really passionately involved in since our first home video release, where we did audio description on Up, have been really involved in the process at Pixar and making sure that this audience has the same home entertainment experience as all of our other audiences. And I'll kick it to Anna.
Thanks, Eric. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. Thanks for having us. My name is Anna Capizera, and I'm the Director of U.S. Audio Description Operations at Deluxe Media. I actually started in AD as a writer and was one of the writers on Up. So it's a great full circle here with Eric. I've been working with Pixar for a long time. And so, yeah, just excited to be here and talk more about this. Christina?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me and us. I'm Christina Stevens. I am the writing manager at Deluxe, and I oversee our staff writers as well as a stable of freelance writers in the process of writing the AD script and getting it through the the process before recording, which brings us to Laura.
I'm Laura Post, and I am a narrator for audio description. I work a lot with Deluxe. I do a number of titles for Disney and Pixar. I've done a bunch of the Pixar shorts that have come out recently, and that's my job. I guess back to you, Tom.
Well, welcome all of you, and it's great to have you joining us here for this panel. Eric, let me start with you and have you talk to us a little bit about why is audio description so important to Pixar?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I think the best way to encapsulate that is we're storytellers, and from the beginning of telling any story, we think about who's going to receive the story, what is our audience. And we want everyone in our audience to have an exciting, moving, compelling experience accessible to them. There are a number of us who have blind or low vision family members or experiences and an understanding of how to create this type of compelling experience for this audience. And it became really, really important to us when we realized how limited the availability was in the home entertainment market. So right around the time that Up was being released, we really wanted to lean into it. We really wanted to try and make it a priority, not only for ourselves creatively, but also for our studio, for Disney. So we really pushed hard to have the audio description included on the disc, on the DVD and Blu-ray. It was very well received, and it was so exciting for us and so exciting for the community that we really leaned into it 100%. So now 100% of our catalog, our shorts and features, have audio description, and we've made sure that it's all available on the Disney Plus platform. We also have deep relationships with partner organizations such as Lighthouse San Francisco, Guide Dogs for the Blind, and the Blind Babies Foundation. And we feel like we're doing a great job, but we also want to spend time with those communities and have them tell us how we're doing. So we'll often have pre-pandemic, when we could actually get together, we would have screenings at Pixar, invite over as many folks as could make it, as many folks as could fit, and then spend time before the screening and after talking about what was important to them. What types of aspects of storytelling were missing from other audio description experiences? What could we do? What was special about animated films that needed to be described? You know, really trying to deeply understand the storytelling aspects that we could bring to the table. And so in the beginning, way back when we first worked with Anna, it was with WGBH. And since then, the majority of our work has been with Deluxe.
Right.
And we've developed an incredible partnership with them.
That's excellent. We're going to get into that in a little bit. You mentioned WGBH. That was my first jumping off point in an accessibility career. Worked with a descriptive video service, and that feedback you talked about is so important. I actually ran some federal grants where we were, at the time, 30 plus years ago, looking at how to more effectively describe kids programming. And you know, we had a question, or the description was like a mouse-sized fruit bat, and we asked the kids how big a mouse was, and they had their arms way out wide, almost like the wingspan of an eagle. And I'm like, geez, if I ever see a mouse like that, I'm gonna run. And so it just really came back to you know, we really need to be more tangible in the types of objects if we're going to do any type of comparison. So it's interesting to see all of this come full circle, and who knew 30 years later I would be moderating a panel, and you're talking about GBH, and now a lot more, including Deluxe, a lot more organizations are into the AD space, and that's really excellent. That feedback remains at the forefront of how to do this. And I know at NBC, we've been doing live audio description around the Olympics since we have the broadcast rights till 2032 around the primetime broadcasts. We add live audio description, and bringing that feedback in from the community is so critical. And whether it's pre-recorded or live AD, you really do want to bring in that community. Nothing about us without us is the mantra that was behind getting the ADA passed, and it really means bringing disability community into whatever you're doing, whether it's AD or any type of accessibility effort. So Anna, let's start with you, dig into a little bit of the process that you go through to get this content accessible.
Sure. So it all starts, of course, with receiving the videos that we need in order to start working on the AD script. And, we're already usually in touch with Eric and his team in terms of, this title is coming in and what type of casting, if there are any notes for that, just so that we can get started and have that in mind when we work on the project. So we'll get everything set up in our cloud-based platform, which we can write and record in. And just what I'll start thinking about is just who's a good writer for this project. What is this title about? We know this is a very sort of high touch, white glove treatment type of AD work. And so we really, put our most experienced writers on these Pixar projects and stay in touch with them and in touch with Eric about working on it. So the writer will watch the entire film first, or the short or show, and so that they just know the continuity and what it's about and the tone and everything like that. And then they'll get started on writing. And it really is an interesting process because something with a lot of dialogue, sometimes you don't have a lot of pauses to fit the description in, but Pixar movies are pretty visually rich. So figuring out what to prioritize, sometimes there's no dialogue at all. Some of the Pixar shorts, they maybe have music or sound effects, or sound effects that replace dialogue, like animal noises or something like that. And so I think that Christina can speak pretty well to the writer's process and what are sort of interesting projects to work on and what can be difficult.
All right, Christina, I'll let you take it from there.
And you are on mute.
So sorry. With Pixar projects, they really can run the gamut. We have some that are all about the dialogue and all about characters, going back and forth and being really cute and funny and witty with each other. And then there are some that are almost silent. And the great thing with our really experienced writers, speaking to these people that I've worked with for a really long time, they just love movies. We all have such a passion, and that's one really great thing about working with Pixar is I think we all share the same sort of passion for storytelling. And so when we approach it, it's not the same, this happens, and this happens. It's sort of the overall, how does it feel when we watch this? And that's maybe sort of a woo-woo way of describing it. But it's a way of, getting in the tone of the story. If it's more melancholy, we're going to use certain words, we're going to use a certain sentence structure. And with something with a lot of short montages, we'll use short sentences to kind of match the visuals there. There's a lot of thought that goes into it on that end of things. And then once we have the script, we get notes from Eric and his team and possibly from the filmmakers themselves. And then we do our best to incorporate it. We'll have the writer go through the script since they know it the best. And then they can let the filmmaker or whoever was giving the notes know, this works or this doesn't work, or here's why I did it the way I did it. And it's really a great dialogue that we have back and forth they're not telling us you have to do it this way. It's just, we're having a conversation. And it's a really great partnership.
So does that differ from how you work with other clients?
Yeah. I mean, there's some clients that don't give any notes. And then there's some clients that give notes and just kind of have to make them work, or, it's all over the place.
And how do you deal with, the audience that you're writing for, the filmmakers know, the film that they're making, and Eric is obviously between you and them, or connecting you with them. How do you maintain your independence around, style, et cetera, versus, maybe working with people who are new to audio description and may not be as familiar with some of the approaches that we've all come to know and love that make audio description work?
We really do our best to, and we've done it a lot, especially the experienced writers, where we are basically explaining, why we do things the way we do things. There are a lot of standards and guidelines in the audio description world, and there's a reason we do them this way. And we do our best to explain them to the client and explain, why they're done this way. And it's sort of up to them at that point, what they want to do with it. Of course, we want to advocate for the end product, but it can be kind of a tricky line to walk.
I can throw a little in there as I'm sort of the liaison between maybe some folks who might not have as much experience, but also have like a really clear vision of the story. It's sort of about education, bi-directionally. There are certain things maybe about the tone or the character or the feeling that we're trying to get across that maybe Christina's team doesn't have. But then similarly, there might be some conventions or, time-based limitations or, other things about the best way to present audio description that our producers and directors might not understand. So I kind of sit in the middle. And I've learned enough over the years to be able to at least articulate and broker a compromise if one needs to happen, if there's any tension between what I really think needs to be said and what should be said. But there's plenty of other folks on my team, Cynthia Slavens, Jesse Schroeder, Jeremy Sloan, Susan Eggett, a bunch of Pixar folks, and Jonas Rivera actually is an executive at Pixar. And we all take turns being involved, reading and facilitating. So I feel like we have a deepening understanding within the studio that goes all the way up the executive ranks of what's important, why it's important. So it gets easier the more you teach.
Excellent. So, Laura, we have, the film, we have the script. Now, you bring it home, and you're the person I hear when I'm watching that show. So tell us a little bit about your side of the world.
So the main responsibility as the talent is to just fit in with the movie. You don't want to be noticeable. You want to try and match the tone of the movie or show or short as closely as possible. And audio description is a very subtle art. You're trying not to editorialize. You want the audience to come to their own conclusions based on what is happening on screen. So you don't put any of your own emotions or opinions about characters in there, as much as you may want to sometimes. Haha. But there's a certain being able to make those slight adjustments to tone, I think, is what makes having a human narrator exceptional in the end product. Knowing that a simple line like "he takes the hat," whether it's a comedic "he takes the hat," or it's a very serious scene, it's "he takes the hat." It's subtle, it's still not editorialized, but it fits in with whatever is happening around, and so it doesn't jar your audience quite as much as, for example, an AI voice. So that's, I think I try to take it as my responsibility to just fit into the movie as seamlessly as possible and hopefully be ignored after that.
You do a great job at it.
Thank you.
And this is, really interesting. I do want to, since we're at the Site Tech Global Conference, probably ought to talk a little bit about tech. I mean, audio description is certainly, we can get into a lot of things here. But you highlighted one area that's a bit controversial in the community, which is, human voiceover talent versus text to speech. And I guess, Eric, I would start with you. How do we balance, obviously we want to keep voiceover talent on, these films and shows, but do you see a role for text to speech somewhere in the audio description space?
Well, probably the best way to address that would be to talk about how we use artificial intelligence or AI concepts as part of some of the things we actually do. So we have noise reduction technology and increasingly trying to understand how to, we call it super res, how to create higher resolution images without the burden of rendering. So in image production, it's one of the most important things that our artists do is create the images. We do lean on artificial intelligence for certain things so that we can reach a scale, so that we can tell the best story possible within the constraints, time and space constraints around us. We are in a privileged position, at Pixar specifically, that we have enough resources to do this, high touch version of audio description for everything that we do. But, if we couldn't, I would still want our audience to have the opportunity to have an audio description experience. So if the time and space confounded us and we had to lean on AI for some portion of what we were doing, I think we would absolutely do it, because I think that I would rather our audience have some audio description than nothing at all.
So when you say AI at scale, where would something come into play like that? Can you give me an example?
Well, if I look at beyond Pixar, if I look at the entire Disney catalog, if we didn't have an individual or groups of individuals like us to be able to personally curate every audio description experience, for the entire Disney catalog, I wouldn't say don't provide the audio description for it. I would say let's look for appropriate, reasonable technology solutions so that we can raise the amount of accessibility that's available. So that's where scale would come in. If the folks who were available to address the accessibility needs and wants that we had weren't available, where could technology help us get to that scale?
Yeah, and I think, for us, I agree. I think, on the text to speech side, I don't believe that anyone is advocating for removing the human voice talent from first run films and TV shows, things like that. But like anything in the AI space, or even in text to speech, we do need to find opportunities where we can, exercise the technology, right? And see how we can push it forward and how can it make the process even more efficient, more cost effective, whatever that might mean and down the road. But the only way to get there is with, trying to, do the necessary R&D to get that, to get that benefit longer term. But I think where we are today is, AI is still not where it would need to be. Maybe even text to speech, certainly not for a first run film, but for a corporate video, it might be just fine, and might be the difference between having a described, all hands video content for a meeting versus not having it described. I guess, Christina and Laura, any perspectives from the creative side to what I just talked about in terms of where we might find opportunities to drive AI forward, but perhaps just not on that first run film or TV show?
I'm gonna let Anna take this one actually.
Okay.
Sure. So I think something maybe for documentary content might be a more realistic place to look into using synthetic voice. And as Eric mentioned, to scale. If it's a docuseries on a rush or a lot of work coming through, and you need to do it that way, that may be a place that we would start looking at. Something I did want to mention in terms of just the Pixar way and the human touch is that, as I mentioned in the beginning, I'll be in touch with Eric when we start a Pixar project, and he and his team will discuss, any choices they might have in terms of casting. What type of voice would they like it to be culturally relevant? The representation. These are all really important things that go into specifically casting Pixar projects. And so I'll really work hand in hand with Eric and the writer, whether it's Christina or another one of our staff writers, to talk about, what is this movie? What is it about? What's the tone? Who do you think would be, if casting for representation is very important? And we have voice actors that we know so well, like Laura, who, we really trust to read the content, read the AD, hear the program audio, know the story, and guide themselves with that as sort of, a director role. I've heard Laura voice kids shows and young adult shows. She has a higher register, she has a lower register that she's used for, like Wonder Woman and stuff like that. And so we'll really think about what actors do we have who are really good at, knowing how to read the AD and the content to get the right tone. And then what does Eric and his team, what are they interested in, so that we can all work together to send samples so that Pixar can sort of choose, what they would like. And I think that would be very hard with AI, especially in terms of obviously representation.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think I think that makes sense. Find the right areas to exercise the technology. How has the technology changed the writing and maybe even the voice piece of it? I know at WGBH back in the day, we had these 3/4-inch tapes and we had, software, and it was quite the process. And then we went into a studio and did the mix session. It's been a while since I've been on the production side of audio description, more on the distribution side. And we certainly have our challenges there in terms of keeping audio description with the content as it moves across platforms. But Christina or Laura, anything you want to embellish on here in terms of how technology has improved since AD really came into its own?
Yeah, we have an excellent cloud-based platform, which we write and record in. And even when I started in about 2014, we were not using it. So when I went into the office, you'd have to get the video downloaded. We weren't using tape then, but you'd get the video downloaded. And it was sort of a process, exporting files and getting them to the record room, and then the actors would have to come in. And we did get onto the cloud platform before the pandemic hit, which was a big blessing because once we all went home, it allowed us to kind of seamlessly go into working from home and being able to work from basically wherever, and be able to work with a wider range, people from all over for, our freelancer pool and stuff. And then it really changed things for the actors that they did not have to come in to record in the booth. And, we had like a lot of scheduling because we had, 2 recording booths. And so there was a lot of shuffling and scheduling. And then during the pandemic, I'm not even sure how that would have worked. But I'll let Laura go into how it's been recording.
Yeah, the cloud-based platform is a total blessing. It's really nice for recording from home, which we all had, basically the entire voice acting world had to adjust to for the pandemic. I had always been recording from home pre-pandemic for certain things, but I used to go into Deluxe and go into the little studio they had there, and I would record things. And it's always hard because you don't know. You might know the program length of what you're going to record, but it doesn't necessarily tell you how long you're going to take to record that. It doesn't tell you, So it's nice to not have to worry about maybe holding other people up if you're taking longer, or wasting studio time if you finish really fast, although it's always better to finish fast. So it's been really nice from a talent perspective. It kind of makes my scheduling for my day a lot easier. I'm sure and it also makes your guys' scheduling a lot easier when everybody's going from home too. So yeah, it's great.
I can definitely say, we've got a really short amount of time left. We're only about a minute, so I'll be super quick. But just the speed, the ability to, engage our creatives and, get approvals on things. I mean, it's the technology has really made a huge difference.
I want to thank everybody for joining us. I mean, there's so much more we can dig into here. Eric, I'd love to maybe get Ned to get us back together next year and talk about how we keep content intact when we move it across platforms, right? I mean, you talked about Disney Plus. Disney Plus is on our Xfinity X1 and Flex and Zumo TV products now. And so obviously people are getting that content, but sometimes it airs on TV, and it airs on TV, and the content may or may not be there. So plenty more to talk about as we move forward.
Absolutely.
I know we're over time here, but does anybody have any final words of wisdom here that we want to impart?
I'll just say some of the themes that have come up, sort of like working together, collaboration, trust, partnership, just huge parts of continuing to move this really exciting, important work forward. So yeah, Ned, let's get everyone back together. Tom, I'd love to spend some time thinking with all of us about the future of audio description and how we can make it even better.
Great. Well, thanks everyone. And we will hopefully be back together soon, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
If you listen to me on That Real Blind Tech Show, you know I'm an absolute huge fan of audio description. That was so awesome to get a behind-the-scenes look at how Pixar does things. Next up is a session all about Amazon Alexa. And I have to apologize if I set off any of your devices, which is why on my podcast, That Real Blind Tech Show, we coined it the A-Lady. Thanks for that, Allison Malloy. This session, which is entitled Accessibility is AI's Biggest Challenge, How Alexa Aims to Make It Fairer for Everyone. This session, you're going to hear from Peter Korn and Josh Millet, and moderating this session is Caroline DeRosier, who is the CEO and founder of Scrively.
Accessibility is AI's biggest challenge, how Alexa aims to make it fairer. Moderator Caroline DeRosier, speakers Peter Korn and Dr. Joshua Mealy.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Accessibility and AI's Biggest Challenge, Making It Fairer for Everyone. And today we have Peter Korn and Josh Mealy. Peter is the Director of Accessibility for Devices and Services at Amazon. He led the development of the Voice View screen reader for Fire TV, Fire tablets, and Kindle devices. He initiated the first access features for voice interfaces, including Alexa Captions and Tap to Alexa, as well as Show and Tell for Alexa. He also facilitated key improvements to React Native Accessibility, which is technology used by hundreds of applications that can all now be far more accessible. And taken all together, millions of people today use these accessibility features built into Amazon devices. And then we have Josh Mealy, who is a blind scientist, community leader, and inventor with a history of developing innovative information accessibility solutions for blind people. Currently, Josh is a principal accessibility research at Amazon, where he helps guide the non-visual customer experience for device accessibility and advises widely across Amazon on inclusive design and research methods. His work integrates disability inclusive design, accessibility engineering, disability studies, and other disciplines, applying emerging technologies and trends to a range of information accessibility challenges. Josh holds a bachelor's degree in physics and a PhD in psychoacoustics from the University of California at Berkeley. So welcome, Josh and Peter, and we are looking forward to hearing all of your thoughts on today's session topic, which is once again, accessibility and AI's biggest challenge, making it fairer for everyone. And we're going to be talking about how Amazon AI technologies like Alexa make deeply meaningful changes to the lives of blind and visually impaired people. So we're going to talk about Alexa, speech recognition and voice technology, how to delight a new and growing customer base of digital and accessibility natives, and hear about how Amazon is approaching the AI and accessibility challenges ahead. So we have a lot to cover. Let's get right into it with the first question of the day. Alexa has been around for 8-ish years and has evolved a bit. Can you share a few examples of what Alexa can do today that she couldn't do at first? Anything folks in the blind community should know about but may not at the moment. And Peter, let's start with you.
Sure, Carolyn, and thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here. You know, Alexa's first public outing was at the CSUN Assistive Technology Conference, where we showed it first to blind people. And when we showed it at that time, it was this disembodied voice in the background that you could talk to and ask about the weather and the news and play songs. But and that was amazing that you could do it without, you know, having a microphone near you. But since that time, it's grown a lot. And one great example is the show and tell feature that combines computer vision, machine learning, and Alexa to identify household items. And I want to pitch it over to Josh because he had a large task, a large thing to do with show and tells coming to the world.
Thanks, Peter, and thanks, Caroline. Really fun conversation. I'm looking forward to what we have to talk about here today. So the you know, show and tell is a feature designed specifically for blind and visually impaired people on Alexa devices that we call multimodal devices, the ones that have screens in addition to Alexa, and they also have cameras. So the idea of show and tell was if you are a blind chef or person at home and you've got a bunch of boxes or cans or packaged items that are not necessarily labeled in Braille, let's say you just got them home from the grocery store, or you know, your categorization methods on the shelf weren't you know, you weren't very organized when you put things on the shelf. You can actually just hold a box or can up to the camera for Alexa to identify, and you just say, "What am I Alexa, what am I holding?" And that's she'll the first time you do that, she'll actually teach you how to do it. So there's a bunch of steps to it, but once you've done it a time or two, Alexa will just jump right in and do her best to tell you what she's seeing. And this is an experience that sounds really simple, but it's actually something that not only serves a really important purpose for independent blind people to be able to, for example, open a can of olives instead of chili when olives are what they want, but also to make sure that the right information is being provided. So it doesn't just do an exact match and you know, figure out like, oh, that is exact, I know exactly what that is and I'm 100% confident, but you know, lighting varies, labeling varies, and you know, sometimes your thumb is over part of the label, so an exact match isn't always possible. So it was really important to make sure that our success, we were measuring success against not an exact match, but being helpful. And being helpful means providing an exact match if you can, but it also means if you see branding information that you can, if she sees branding information that can be identified, then that will be spoken. If neither of those can be done, then of course there's probably text-based information that can be spoken, read out loud from the label. And if it just says olives, that's really helpful, even if it doesn't provide an exact match. So really understanding deeply what the customer experience is, what blind people need from something like this is part of what we're trying to bring AI to do, and part of what we at Amazon are really trying to do with all of the experiences that we design. If they're, this one is specifically for blind and visually impaired people, because most people who can see don't need their cans read for them. But we're interested in doing this kind of deep dive on how the interaction works for everyone. And AI is a really key part of being proactive, making the right decisions, taking steps for the benefit of the customer without necessarily making all those steps be asked for explicitly by the customer. Peter, you might have some other examples.
Yeah,
there.
no, I think another great example that is of very broad use, that's in the very same vein of being helpful, is Alexa routines. We didn't have routines 8 years ago. Now you can say, Alexa, good morning. And your good morning routine involves turning on your coffee pot downstairs and turning on lighting at a low level so that you can head down the stairs, and giving you your morning briefing, and so on. And that's a fantastic addition that we added in the last 8 years.
And these are examples of things that that weren't, they're part of making things work better for everyone, right?
Oh, that's fantastic. This is really AI for good, right? And I think that this kind of transitions nicely to talking about, a question that I'm sure a lot of people have on their minds from last year at Sight Tech Global. Some of your other colleagues at Amazon were speaking to the idea of ambient AI, where you anticipate a customer speaking less to Alexa in the future, and the AI instead more proactively acting on their behalf. Now, this could be very helpful. I think, some people might also be concerned. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on the ambient AI, moving from just simple tasks like playing music to more proactive assistance, like notifying a customer when a package was delivered. So are we getting closer at this point from a technology perspective to this ambient intelligence reality? And what's changed over the past year since we saw that last presentation? And maybe this time I'll start with you, Josh.
Sure, and I think I'll toss a few ideas off, and then I'm definitely interested in hearing what Peter has to say also. But I mean, you can think of you mentioned package delivery. It's a great example of Alexa is tied into Amazon's network and knows when your package has been delivered. And until recently, we had a way of informing people that their package was delivered, or rather that there was a message or a notification pending for them. So if you saw the ring, the yellow ring of light on Alexa's crown, or if you saw some other visual, other visual notifications were used, then you knew that there was a notification waiting for you, and you could say, what are my notifications, or cancel my notifications. However, if you couldn't see, and this is a problem that many of our blind and visually impaired customers encountered, if you can't see, that light, that visual cue that was designed very intentionally to be unobtrusive and uninvasive was not available to you. You didn't know that there was a message pending if you couldn't see. And so we have recently released a new feature that you can turn on, which is notify when nearby, which basically means that when she thinks that you are nearby, if she hears noise, or if she hears your voice, or if the camera is on and can see a person, then then actually there will be a spoken notification. There'll be a spoken message that there's notifications pending, so that you as a blind person don't need to see that light or ask randomly, oh, do I have notifications? So this is part of how we're trying to make the system smarter and engage appropriately with people when you activate that feature. So if you know that you want to be told about notifications when you're nearby, when she knows that you're nearby, she will say, hey, you've got notifications. Do you want to hear them? There are probably some other examples that Peter, what do you think?
Well, what I really like about Notify When Nearby is it addresses what our colleague Mark Mulcahy calls the candy bowl problem. Mark is a principal software engineer at Amazon. He led development of the voice use screen reader that's built into all of our Echo Show devices. And he's also blind. And when a colleague puts out a bowl of candy, at least when we're back in the office, how do you know it's there? And Notify When Nearby brings that equality, that fairness to our blind customers, and the other features that are part and parcel of ambient intelligence are likewise things we want to make sure are benefiting everyone. And a few examples of this. So I mentioned the good morning routine, but we also have something called hunches. So you might have a good night routine, and Alexa might have a hunch that normally when you go to bed, you turn the lights off downstairs. You make sure that the garage door is closed. And so the hunch would be Alexa saying, hey, do you want me to turn off the lights? Because I noticed you said goodnight. And that kind of hunch is another great example of taking a further big step down the road to this vision of full ambient intelligence. A third example is entertainment, where I might be wondering with my family, what do we want to watch tonight? And we can just ask Alexa. And based on our watch history that we've shared, Alexa might suggest, hey, this might be a good night for a princess movie, or a great night, we're coming up on Christmas, maybe a traditional Christmas movie like Die Hard, because you're also an action fan. And this is, again, something that would benefit everybody. And, today, as of, I don't know, the last month, about 30% of smart home interactions are initiated by Alexa based on hunches, based on what she's recognized is going on. And nearly 90% of Alexa's daily routines are initiated without a customer saying so. So we're taking really strong strides down the road of ambient intelligence.
Interesting, Josh. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about, just a follow-up question, about the research that kind of powered these Alexa features like hunches and routines. Can you speak more to the research behind that, actually collecting information from Alexa users?
Well, Amazon prides itself on being a customer obsessed company. We want to delight our customers, and we want to do everything we can to provide the products and services that people want. And that, of course, includes customers with disabilities. So we do a lot of customer research. And one of the things that when we begin to do, we start by asking our customers what kinds of things they want. We can talk a little bit more about how we engage with our customers with disabilities through conferences and through focus groups and stuff like that. But we begin very often with by talking to people on the inside of Amazon. We have many people working for Amazon, and many of them have disabilities. And so we conduct internal research ahead of our external research to make sure that we're going in the right direction, to get all the feedback we can about how our new features are landing with all of our customers, including those with disabilities. So we knew that hunches and routines and and show and tell, we're going to be very powerful, because we started by asking Amazonians, folks that work at Amazon, and we knew that they were going to be extremely useful for people with disabilities, because we have a very strong and healthy community of people with disabilities of all types working at Amazon. I think, I can tell you a little bit more about we're also very interested in engaging in, we do all kinds of research. And one of the things that we're really leaning into is making sure that the research that we conduct, even if it's not directly intended to be accessible research, we produce, we want to reach out to our customers. And when we do, we want to make sure that the survey or the focus group or whatever activity we're engaged with at the moment is going to be inclusive and accessible, so that if somebody responds to a survey that's not necessarily even about blindness or low vision, we want to know that that survey tool is going to be accessible with a screen reader, is going to be have appropriate contrast settings so that people with low vision are comfortable responding to it. Because when we ask to hear the voices of our customers, we want to know that we're hearing all of the voices of our customers, including those with disabilities of all kinds.
And I want to underscore something that Josh said about our employees with disabilities. I think that's a real superpower that Amazon has in designing accessible products and services for everyone. We have thousands of people with disabilities and their allies in our affinity group of our Amazon PWD affinity group. And that strength has really borne out in the access features we've delivered. And I would invite all of the companies that are participating in SightTech Global to really lean in, hire and lean into employees with disabilities and how you make your products.
That's great. So let's really dig into the heart of this topic today, which is making AI fairer for everyone. How do you ensure at Amazon that you are building for everyone? What are more examples of this? And when you're creating the future of Alexa, how exactly are you working with folks to do that? Can you speak a little bit more to actually making the AI fair?
So there are a couple of ways we do that. And the first is, of course, tapping our employees, tapping our customers, doing research to understand what are the pain points, what are the areas where we could be doing more, where Alexa or our other technologies could really solve pain points that customers with disabilities have. And I think it even goes beyond fairness and into opportunities where technology and digital services can just fundamentally be better than their physical alternatives. An electronic book is a book whose fonts can be as large as the size of your screen. Electronic shopping, online shopping, means you don't have to reach for shelves that are hard to reach from your wheelchair, or see what the two different cans are on the shelf because you don't have show and tell with you in every store. Particularly now coming to AI and fairness, I'm delighted that we recently announced and began collaboration with Apple, Meta, Microsoft, and the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, their Berkman Center, on getting large data sets of impaired speech so that we can train our voice assistants to recognize speech from somebody who is perhaps fairly far along in ALS, or whose speech is impaired by Down syndrome or cerebral palsy. And that's both from a fairness point of view, right, that everyone should be able to use Alexa, but it also leans into solving problems that really can't be solved well any other way. If I don't have motor skills, how do I turn on and off my light switch? And if that same, neurological disease like ALS is impacting my speech as well as my motor skills, boy, it's so important that I be able to do that with my voice or with whatever physical abilities I have. So I think it's both fairness and even beyond fairness, looking at, with show and tell, how we can make the lives of our customers better beyond what they have today in the physical world.
Right. I think this raises an interesting point, because a lot of people are growing up not only as digital natives, but also accessibility natives at this point. People who have had a disability for a long portion of their life, and they're familiar with how to embrace it. And they're raised in this age of digital tech. They're very familiar about it. And we often talk about that community, but it seems we also don't talk about the experience of the new blind cohort. And Josh, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, the flip side of digital or accessibility natives is folks who, are losing their vision late in life or, as adults, and don't necessarily have there's a lot to learn about using a screen reader and using technology as a blind person. It is extremely challenging, along with all of the other things that somebody has to learn when their vision is changing. And so one of the great things that I think we're able to do with Alexa is to sort of bootstrap or scaffold that process so that you can actually remain connected to and able to access the information you want. You can still read, you can still read the news. You can still access podcasts. You can still watch movies with audio description. You can still do, listen to your favorite radio station. You can ask questions, get information from Wikipedia, all of this without knowing anything about how to use a screen reader or a computer as a blind person. And that's not to say that folks shouldn't or don't need to learn those things, but it's essential that you start somewhere. And that because isolation is such a critical problem for both aging populations, especially aging populations that are losing vision or other capabilities, to have a system that you can just talk to and get information from is really powerful. And that's one of the most important groups of people that I think we're able to help. We talk about digital equity, we talk about fairness, and this is one of the most important groups who they're not part of the vocational rehabilitation. They're not in education, and they often get left behind. And this is why Alexa is such a powerful force in so many people's lives as they are aging and losing vision.
I also want to tease out something about accessibility natives, because I think there's another facet to that cohort that's really interesting. A few years ago at the NFB National Convention, a young blind boy came up to our booth. Alexa, Siri, Google, what time is it? Alexa, Siri, Google, what's the weather? And it was just completely natural to him. And then he found the remote to our Fire TV that we had in our booth. And he just, with complete comfort, navigated to Netflix, turned on audio description, and settled in to watch Cars 3, because it was just, our whole purpose in the booth was to be there for him. And I love the sense of entitlement, because of course he should be entitled to all that technology has to offer. And I'm really looking forward to what he and all of his accessibility native cohort are going to demand of us in the coming years as they grow up, and they've grown up with this and want yet still more. And I think that that's one of the exciting things about the years to come.
And Peter, we contrast this with, just a few years ago, people were shocked and delighted to even have a screen reader that worked well on a TV. And now the expectations are so much higher, and that's what we want. That's what we want to see. We don't want it to be a surprise that there's accessibility. We don't want it to be a surprise that there's good accessibility. We want people to expect accessibility across the board and to be divinely dissatisfied when it's not up to their standards, and let us know and help us make it better.
So thinking about the future at this point, I know there are accessibility related challenges that you're facing today and some that you're looking to tackle in terms of obstacles for the future in making voice technology and AI equitable. And with just under about 4 minutes left, I'd love to hear both of your thoughts on these challenges and what's next from here.
I'll go ahead I'll go ahead and start. I mean, I think to your point about what we had a few years ago, I remember when VoiceView came out for the Kindle e-reader, and one of the comments in the review was they were surprised at how good the voice is in an e-reader. And I think we're going to continue to see, really exciting improvements in the quality and caliber of text-to-speech. And there's a ton of AI behind that, understanding what is being said. If I'm reading a Kindle book and with Alexa, and the passage in the book says, he jumped back frightened by the ghost that came through the door, you'd love that to be a frightened sounding voice. So there's some neat stuff happening there. There's some great stuff happening in computer vision. I think we're really just scratching the surface. We recently introduced a feature on the Blink cameras, where on your iPhone, if you connect to your camera, will actually describe what the camera sees. And I think there's a ton more that's going to happen there. Josh, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, it's just there. We talk about AI as if we know what we're talking about, and it's going to be stunning to see what the technology evolves into in the next few years. And what I think is most interesting will be to discover the new uses that we haven't even thought of. We're already using AI for improving text-to-speech, for improving computer vision. And those are really, like, we haven't begun to build. Amazon recently released a little robot called Astro that is it does a few things, but imagine what we could do with real AI and real the capability of having machines move things for us, do things for us, and we're seeing self-driving vehicles. That's going to get better, and equity is always going to be an issue. We will always want to make it better. We will always want to make it more equitable, and we're always going to be pushing the limits and using the same tools that the tools themselves will be the solution to the problems that the tools themselves present. So I think I'm so excited to be able to work at among the accessibility folks at Amazon who are going to be finding these new applications of machine learning and what we call AI for accessibility purposes.
Very cool. Well, we're all excited to find out what's next. And thank you so much to Josh and Peter for sharing your thoughts on this topic. Accessibility in AI helps empower people in so many ways, but we absolutely need to make sure it is fair and equitable to everyone. So thanks everyone for listening, and back to you, SightTech Global.
Who would have thought that a company that started out selling used books on the internet would end up developing one of the best smart assistants for people with disabilities? It really is a pretty incredible world when you think about it. Well, that's it for day one of Sight Tech Global. Remember, we'll be back bright and early tomorrow at 8 a.m. Pacific. Be sure to check out our agenda as we have product discussions coming from ARX and Celeste, as well as from the people who brought you HumanWare's Stellar Trek. Tomorrow, we're going to have many discussions with top experts working in AI about the rapid advancements of AI and accessibility. Before I sign off today, I'd really like to thank our sponsors, iSenpai, Fable, Google, Amazon, LinkedIn, HumanWare, Ford, Microsoft, APH, and Waymo. I'm Brian Fischler, your host of Sight Tech Global. I was all set to say that we're out, but before we sign off, I'm going to hand things over to John Glass for a final word. John is the chairman of the board for the Vista Center. Over to you, John. Take us home.
Hi, I'm John Glass, chair of Vista Center's board of directors. I was born blind and began my journey with Vista Center when I was in the first grade. While my sighted classmates were learning to read print, I was being taught Braille, and Vista Center's Braille library had the books that our class was reading. Growing up, I participated in Vista Center's youth programs and made several good friends along the way. After graduating from St. Mary's College with my bachelor's degree in business administration, I took a job with Advanced Computer Controls, a telecommunications company here in Silicon Valley. As customer service manager, I needed to have our product manuals in Braille, and Vista Center's volunteers produced them by hand, approximately 30 volumes worth. Without these manuals, I would not have been able to be successful in my job for the next 8 years. I also have worked for access technology companies including Arkenstone and Benetech, creator of the Bookshare.org online library for people with print-related disabilities. Today, in addition to serving as Vista Center's board chair, I volunteer and support our important nonprofit financially. As a former client who has benefited from Vista Center's programs and services, I am committed to leading the board of directors to support our mission. It is a real honor and privilege being able to give back to an organization which has helped me grow both personally and professionally. Vista Center's board is committed in our determination to work with dedicated staff to bring life-changing programs and services to thousands of clients every year. We are thrilled with this year's Sight Tech Global Conference and honored to have so many world-class leaders on this virtual stage. We believe that technology has the potential for helping those of us who are blind or have low vision to live full and rewarding lives. I want to thank the generous sponsors, organizers, presenters, and attendees. It is all of you who are making our Sight Tech Global event such a success. Thank you again for joining. We look forward to hosting more Sight Tech Global conferences in the future. I thank you for any financial contribution you can make to support Vista Center.
That's a wrap. Thanks for joining the event. See you tomorrow at 8 a.m. Pacific Time. That's a wrap. Thanks for joining the event. See you tomorrow at 8 a.m. Pacific Time. That's a wrap. Thanks for joining the event. See you tomorrow at 8 a.m. Pacific Time. That's a wrap. Thanks for joining the event. See you tomorrow at 8 a.m. Pacific Time. That's a wrap. Thanks for joining the event. See you tomorrow at 8 a.m. Pacific Time. That's a wrap. Thanks for joining the event. See you tomorrow at 8 a.m. Pacific Time. That's a wrap. Thanks for joining the event. See you tomorrow at 8 a.m. Pacific Time. That's a wrap. Thanks for joining the event. See you tomorrow at 8 a.m. Pacific Time. That's a wrap. Thanks for joining the event. See you tomorrow at 8 a.m. Pacific Time. That's a wrap. Thanks for joining the event. See you tomorrow at 8 a.m. Pacific Time. That's a wrap. Thanks for joining the event. See you tomorrow at 8 a.m. Pacific Time.